Hello, good evening and welcome. I feel like some sort of 1980s newsreader. Liz has just walked in and then walked out again. That's basically the sum of Liz's day, walking in and out. But no, she's in a general artistic mode at the moment. So she probably won't be joining us. I've been kicked out of the nerve centre room because it's just being used as an art studio now for the current purposes. So I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but it's just me today, this evening, doing a little talk. Can you hear me, first of all? Yeah. Liz says yes, but she's in the other room with the door open. So that's probably not what I'm going for. Can you people that aren't in the same building as me hear me? This is crucial. Yes, loud and clear. Thank you, Ben. Great. I won't say personal thank yous to everyone in the chat, but it's great that our friends are here with us today again. Thank you very much. So I'll start rabbiting away. So basically, David Bohm, DJ was, I think, put in the chat that he wasn't familiar with him at all. So that's good. So hopefully the little information that I will impart will seem like something new and revelatory a little bit anyway. But I mentioned, I think in the chat last week with the Temple Plasma chat, that I first came across him when I read this novel by Ian McEwan, The Child in Time. Now, this had a great influence on me. I mean, the subject matter of a lost child was probably the biggest single one, although it sort of developed over the years with other books that I read, other things. But this sort of book probably kicked it off and somehow put it in my consciousness. Somehow stories around a lost child, lost children, and way that other narratives about our world, our society, and in the case of this book, I mean, it is a really impressive book. I really enjoyed it. I think, Ian McEwan has sort of disowned it. I mean, this was a very early. It was basically his first sort of full-length novel. Before that, he'd been this. They used to call him Ian Macabre, and he was known for doing these like dark little short stories. And then he did the Cement Garden, which was also quite dark, like a sort of novella, and A Comfort of Strangers, which also ended up being quite dark. And so this was like the first sort of longer novel, and it took years to write it. He got married in the meantime and had a couple of kids with this lady. I can't remember her name, Penny someone or other, but she was a spiritual healer or something like that. So this book has got a lot of it. It goes into a lot of science, sort of quantum physics, as a quantum physicist character who's sort of used to sort of explain some sort of theories or how it broadly sort of shapes in with these concepts around time, which is central to the book. But it also weaves them in a little bit with some mentions of spirituality and things like that. William Blake, in passing, not in a big way. But like since then, Ian McEwan's gone very hardcore into science, as in a sort of, trust the science type of a way. From what I gather, I haven't really read any of his later novels, except one called Saturday, which sort of his post 9/11 book, but set in London. But it had a character who was a doctor, a heart surgeon, and he followed this heart surgeon around to get an idea of what he did. But it all keeps on mentioning hardcore science, and he said in interviews afterwards, "Oh, I wish I'd become a scientist and not a novelist." And so it's like he's sort of ashamed of being a creative writer. And now I'm waffling off talking about Ian McEwan when it's supposed to be about David Bohm. But I think the point was that for me, I was very much science is all about sort of reducing the world. Science and mathematics, I was very much, I don't like those. It's all about creativity, English literature, writing. But this book, when it mentioned these quantum physics ideas and how it sort of wove in with ideas of spirituality, and suddenly for me, that sort of opened up science. And it's like, well, hang on, science doesn't have to be about this idea that everything's mechanistic and reducing things to sort of cause and effect, and everything sort of some sort of giant clockwork thing. And these quantum physics ideas, really sort of blew my mind, obviously only reading about them in sort of layman's terms. But that sort of idea that a lot of these modern science ideas have got sort of overlaps with ancient spiritual and religious ideas. Probably, this was sort of the first book that sort of made me sort of think about those. And within that, David Bohm is mentioned as one of the influences on the book by McEwen, and it actually gets name checked within the book. This physicist character mentions him by name. The twin pillars of modern physics are relativity and quantum theories. One describes a causal and continuous world, the other a non-causal, discontinuous world. Is it possible to reconcile them? Einstein failed with his unified field theory. I side with the optimist, like my colleague David Bohm, who anticipates a higher order of theory. And she mentions about she wanted, hopefully, there to be a theory or set of theories in the future, a new theory that would refer to a higher order of reality, a higher ground, the ground of all that is, an undivided whole of which matter, space, time, even consciousness itself would be complicatedly related embodiments, intrusions which made up the reality we understood. It was not entirely fanciful to imagine that one day there could be mathematical and physical descriptions of the type of experience Stephen had recounted. He has a sort of science fiction-y time slip type thing that happens within the novel. Different kinds of time, not simply the linear sequential time of common sense, could be projected through consciousness from the higher common ground, from which consciousness itself would be a function, a limiting case, which in turn would be inseparable from the matter which was its subject, or the space within which it occurred. So there's lots of lots of confusing words and sort of thing, but just to try and break it down, I think for me the big thing, we're go through a bit more detail later, but this sort of so I guess this is one of his big books in terms of Bohm is like a really renowned physicist, so lots of hardcore physics, but this is, I suppose, in terms of books for general public, which don't have a lot of maths in them. There's little bits in there, equations, but generally it's something that a non-scientific brain like myself can read. There's wholeness and the implicate order. So I think in a nutshell, he had this theory, which he also goes into maths to try and get a theoretical mathematical basis for it. But an idea that there's the explicate order, which is essentially the life, that everything we see around us, all matter, us, the planets, the universe. That's the explicate order. And the implicate order is I think there's an implicate order and a supra-implicate order, but essentially it's the supra-implicate order is something that's hidden, but is like I used the words before, like a ground of all there is, but in terms of a sort of like I suppose like a unified field, using the sort of terms of Einstein, but some sort of nothingness, but in terms of, in a sort of physics way of nothingness, where it's all this sort of energy and waves, but somehow from this ground of sort of energy, everything that exists and ever has existed comes from that. And so everything is all part of this giant whole. So again, you get this concept that everything is linked, and the universe and everything in it and across all time is all part of one enormous whole. WHOLE. So just to sort of run back to look at Bohm himself in terms of the person, he is, so I mean, not wanting to compare him with someone like Reich or even Tester in terms of persecution that he suffered. It wasn't quite like that, but at the same time, he was basically exiled really for most of his life from America, where he was born. He was known as being a brilliant physicist. He was born in 1917, and he was doing his PhD at Berkeley University in California, and the supervisor for his PhD was Oppenheimer, and apparently Oppenheimer wanted him to be part of the Manhattan Project. Obviously, the idea of getting all the brilliant minds, all the scientists of the day to work together to create the nuclear atom bomb. But Bohm was turned down because of his Marxist ideology, and he'd been involved with these left-wing movements and sort of union movements. Now, I don't think, I mean, I saw the Oppenheimer film. I don't think, I certainly don't remember. I'm sure it would have jumped out at me if I'd heard his name mentioned within the plot of the film. I don't remember him being mentioned. I mean, there's certainly other scientists were mentioned at the time, and it was a big theme of the film, the Christopher Nolan film. Okay, was it last year or the year before? But anyway, not that long ago. But it was a major theme of it, that Oppenheimer himself and lots of people he's associated with had these left-leanings, communist sympathies, and that was frowned upon, and that there was this tension. And although a lot of the scientists, they needed them to design the bomb, and so a lot of them were tolerated, if you like, but there was this suspicion of them all the time about that they would give away secrets, to the Russians, particularly to the Soviet Union, because of the communist sympathies of a lot of the people, and that was within the narrative of the film anyway. I think that was it was suggested that those suspicions and dislike of people like even Oppenheimer himself, led to his downfall later on, in terms of at that, and also presented that he was pacifist and not wanting the military people, the politicians that had used this weapon that he'd created, and that they turned against him after using him to make the bomb, and then he became a bit of a pariah. So I mean, it's interesting considering all that, and that many that did have these leanings were still accepted onto the Los Alamos Manhattan Project. Bohm wasn't. And I know that would probably make him seem a baddie in many of our eyes, in terms of Marxism is seen as not a great thing. The impression I get though of David Bohm, I suppose, when I've seen him talking and when I've read things by him, it's mainly been much later in life, him talking. I know Temple wrote the plasma book, who became friends with Bohm, later towards the end of his life when Bohm was in London. I think it was Birkbeck College where he was a professor, etc. And he was saying, he didn't regard Bohm as like a communist. He said he was left-leaning, but he didn't regard him as a communist. But I mean, I suppose, I could say I myself, when I was younger, I had sympathies with the left, in inverted commas. And I think we've talked about this before. It's the sort of way where they manipulate things and they can create these movements. And we know that there was a lot of, these big money hidden powers that actually promoted the rise of communism in Russia and the revolution there, and what became the Soviet Union. And that was actually preempted, that was actually instigated, or at least encouraged, by these mega rich billionaires of the day in the US and Britain, I don't doubt. So I think what I'm trying to say is, I think it's probably one of these things where people can get sucked in who are idealistic, and for very good reasons. They don't like the rich and the powerful, and they don't like the way society's run, and it's obviously run to the detriment of the majority of people, and the majority of people end up in a bad position in many different ways, and it's the people in power who get all the benefits. So I think it's a good impulse to be against that, but I think within that they can take the people's well-meaning intent and misuse it and send them off down the wrong path, and then you can end up being captured and embedded in another ideology which is as damaging, if not more damaging, than the one that you were trying to rebel against. And of course, many people did become disillusioned with the way Marxism, communism was, how the way it unfolded in actuality with the Soviet Union and in China and other countries, where it just became another weapon of totalitarianism. And I would say, in the same way of all these different religions that I talked about in previous talks, where there may be kernels of great insight and knowledge and spirituality with many, people sort of in the heart of it, and people who are trying to actually get some connection with some greater reality. But people in power and those that just use these things, get enforced into ideologies, and then they make it a reason to just, to invade countries, to create totalitarianism. So to me, Marxism was no different to Christianity or Islam, or whatever ideology or belief system. It gets taken up and misused. So what I'm trying to say is, the impression I get from Bohm, I think, is that he was certainly well-meaning. And interesting, just it goes along with what I've just been saying there, because what he talked about in his philosophical writings was, he was complaining about the way that Western society in particular, although he said Eastern society as well was certainly becoming the same way, but it was sort of built on this idea of things being fragmented and breaking things down into compartments. And we know that is, increasingly something that's becoming, that's been happening with society, when people are being put into groups, and all this identification politics. And that's just another way of making things fragmentary. And he was saying that was the same with science, with so much of classical science, that it was it's about breaking things down and this sort of mechanistic view of how things work. And so, you know, that same sort of philosophy pervades science the same as it pervades society in terms of general organization and the way people are organized in societies. And he was against that, and he was arguing that this fragmentation is basically why the world's in a terrible state, with wars and destruction of the environment and all sorts of other things. So what he was advocating is that there needs to be a holistic view. And again, that's something that's been turned and used, because now, as we know, that they, you know, again, idealistic people, often young people particularly, where they're like, oh, you know, the previous society hasn't worked, things haven't been right, and then they, whether it's something on a sort of new age side of things, or, you know, the United Nations and all these NGOs, and they say, oh yeah, we need a world government, we need a solution that will bring everyone together, working towards resolving our problems. And, you know, the people are in separate countries and they're fighting each other, so we need, you know, to all come under the same roof, so we're all pulling together and all that. And again, that sounds like a beautiful idealistic way of being. And if it wasn't for the fact that, again, as all the previous times with any ideology, the people in charge are scumbags that just want to exert their own power to the detriment of everyone else. And again, they're using people that are idealistic, whether it's someone in Just Stop Oil or, you know, Black Lives Matter, or whatever. You know, the majority are just well-meaning, and they don't like, you know, to see, you know, hardship and destruction of the environment, and they fall for the narrative that they need to sort of follow this certain way of thinking. And yeah, society's been a mess, but we know that the same people that have made it a mess are the ones now saying there's the solution. But anyway, so Bohm, you know, certainly wasn't talking about anything as in terms of an agenda that I'm aware of to make it that way, but he was just talking about this general fragmentary way of society being created, and that this also was how science was created. So he was trying to propose different ways of science. I mean, even with quantum physics, which in itself is something that's, you know, it's all this idea that a particle can be a wave, or things can be a wave or a particle, and all these things are very much, you know, that things can't be fixed. But even then, there becomes or theories within science, and again, we know a lot of these things are theories. But he was, again, Bohm, talking about or arguing against this idea of a fixed theory, when some people said, right, well, this is it, we're going by this. He said that there should be like an idea that this is sort of a concept of how the world might work. Let's go along with this. Let's see how it works, see if we can adapt it, see how it fits. But to me, that's what true science should be about. True philosophy, all these sort of things. But as we know, with the trust the science, it's a case in point that they say there's a consensus that such and such a thing is true to fit the agenda, obviously, but then they say, right, okay, the consensus has said that, so can't be challenged. No one could be challenged, even if it's another group of scientists who've got very valid, you know, and have done great analysis of the data. That doesn't matter. The consensus on the official front has said one thing, so that's the one we're going with, and you can't have any deviation from it. And that, of course, isn't how science should work. Bohm makes the point, obviously there's been different classical views of science, and then at different times groundbreaking theories have come in. Often they've been fought against, but they've led to a reappraisal of how things work. But yeah, Bohm, he as I say, he wasn't allowed to be part of the Manhattan Project. I'm not sure, maybe he wouldn't have wanted to anyway, but Oppenheimer wanted him to be part, but it was sort of overruled by the military person in charge. But weirdly, so say Oppenheimer was his PhD supervisor, and this was around the time of the war. So there were things within Bohm's thesis which apparently they thought would be useful for the project to make the nuclear bomb. So his PhD thesis became classified before he'd actually gone through his PhD. So it was like it was classified, so he himself couldn't have access to it. So he couldn't go through the sort of process of submitting a PhD, and going for doing this sort of thing where you've got to defend your arguments, and he couldn't do that because it was being classified. But eventually it was sort of, Oppenheimer said, oh yeah, he's done enough to pass. So they said, all right, we'll give it to you anyway. But it's kind of bizarre idea that you write your PhD thesis and then someone said, no, I'm sorry. Again, it's a sort of a thing. It's almost like a thought crime. I'm not saying they weren't saying that what you wrote was subversive, but this idea that again, it's like the contents of your mind it is something that can be imprisoned, or someone else can take control of it. And I suppose that's, if you like, a perfect analogy for this idea of thoughts being contained, and to say, like, it's a good symbol, if you like, of this, where things are contained within an ideology, and it's like, right, you can't access that, you can't try and change that, you can't try and defend it. So yeah, that was quite a bizarre situation. But then also after the war in 1949, due to his communist affiliations, he was the subject of a federal government investigation, and that prompted him to leave the United States. And he seemed to have quite a nomadic existence after that. He went to a number of countries. He went first to Brazil and became a Brazilian citizen. But then as soon as he went to Brazil, oh, I've got some wine here, by the way. Cheers. This is probably a mistake when I'm talking and drinking wine at the same time, but I can blame it if I'm incoherent. I can blame it on the wine. So yeah, when he went to Brazil, I think the American consulate or whatever there, they confiscated his passport. So I think, so saying that he couldn't travel anywhere else outside of Brazil. But I think eventually he got Brazilian citizenship, which meant he could then travel to other countries, but it meant he had to relinquish his American citizenship. I think he said, much later in life, he was sort of allowed to take it back again. And I think he did become a British citizen eventually. To the end of his life, he like I say, he was in London. He stopped for a while as well in Israel. He's a Jewish descent. So he also studied for a while in Israel. So yeah, he was involved in a number of left-wing groups sort of early in life. But yeah, apparently they did use some of his calculations. As I say, his thesis was confiscated during this sort of making of the bomb. But some of his calculations were used for the electromagnetic enrichment of uranium for the bomb dropped in Hiroshima. I haven't heard him talk about how he thought about that. That would be interesting to hear what his thoughts about that, really. But yeah, for me, I like the idea, like I was saying before with Temple, the idea of someone who was a very hardcore physicist and had, you know, a brain that I can't even contemplate in terms of this, you know, mathematical knowledge, but was very open to philosophical and religious discussions with people. And this then, it was sort of, if you like, a little bit of a, probably it might be over dramatizing a little bit, but within the scientific establishment, he had a bit of another sort of mini exile where he, again, there's sort of technical things with this which I've tried to sort of watch and listen, but it difficult for me to grasp. But he'd written a book about quantum physics, just sort of setting out generally how the established position of how it worked. But then in writing this, he started to think that this wasn't quite satisfactory, so he was trying to develop his own ideas, you know, mathematically within scientific boundaries, but he was trying to come up with different formulas which he thought, I suppose in layman's terms, for me, I get the idea that what he was trying to resolve, a bit like, as I think I read in that quote from The Child in Time, when it mentions Einstein trying this unified field theory. And again, Einstein's supposed to have said, you know, God doesn't play dice, talking about quantum theory, but you know, referencing as if he had a belief in God. Bohm, I think, didn't have a religious belief as such. I think he described himself as agnostic. But what I get to in layman's terms, in a way, is where he maybe fell foul of other physicists. He was trying, although within a very mathematical framework, he was, you know, trying to do the scientific equations for it, but he was trying to get to maybe the idea of an origin for things, or something where things come from. And I suppose that, along with all these later, him having these discussions with religious, philosophical people, it maybe created a division where a lot of, you know, as we know, a lot of scientific people were very much, you know, any mention of the spiritual, the religious, you know, is a no-no, and that disqualifies you from being taken seriously. That's the impression I get. Although, you know, I was hearing another physicist do a talk about it. It was that German lady, Ben, who you like the way she said "moo." I can't remember her name now. but she was talking about some of his theories and how he differed from other physicists. You know, it was difficult for me to Sabine. Yeah, so difficult for me to grasp it, because it, you know, it is very technical stuff. But that, to me, on layman's terms, is the big difference, where he's looking for this, not trying to find God, he wouldn't put it in that terms, but as I say, this idea of an implicate order, so some sort of ground of all there is. Sorry, I know that's the phrase I keep using, but it's one of these things difficult to put in words. But I suppose maybe another sort of analogy, a sort of, you know, when you've got sort of white noise static on screen, like a TV screen or something, and you could just say that's sort of the background noise, but then a picture sort of slowly emerges from it. That may be a bad analogy for this idea of just energy, or all these waves and particles that everything is formed from. But then when the patterns emerge from this to come out of it to make the matter, that's the explicate order, the world around us. Excuse me. He did also look into plasma as well. So as I say, Temple was very spent a lot of time with him apparently in his later years, and said how much he admires his work. So I think he was thinking that Bohm's theories on the implicate order maybe tie in with this idea of plasma, which is 99.9% of everything is this plasma. So maybe the implicate order is the plasma, and then out of that there's less than 1% of the physical matter that we all live and breathe in. That's the implicate order. So there may be overlaps there, but he wrote a lot as well about creativity, and he was very interesting in different concepts of time. As I say, for him as well, it was all about a constant movement, and he came up with this concept, hollow movement. Hollow as in hologram, HOLO. So there's this analogy with a hologram, which in itself is a fascinating thing. But like a hologram, obviously, it's well, as I say, obviously, I don't really understand how it bloody works, but created from light waves, I think. But this idea, like within a hologram, each part of it has got the whole image, the whole object within each little bit of the whole hologram. It's mind blowing to me, but for him, I think he was sort of using that as an analogy for this idea of the explicate order, everything that is around in matter, including us, is at the same time still part of this implicate order. So as I say, he was against this idea of fragmentation, where you view everything as being separate, all these different little compartments. Because the old Greeks like first came up with the term atoms, and they had this theory that everything was made up with atoms, which on the face of it seems like an amazing anticipation of what's been found later by science. But for them, an atom is sort of millions of incredibly tiny objects, if you like. But they're still like things, objects, even though they're incredibly tiny, and that makes up everything else. But we now know with quantum physics that an atom itself isn't a solid thing, for want of a better word. It's itself made up of tinier things, electrons and protons, and then there might be smaller things like quarks, and then you get to this kind of thing where things can be particles and waves. And then this sort of mad idea, this sort of non-localization in quantum entanglement, where particles can be linked even though they're at the other end of the universe. Again, how do they know this? But anyway, that again, this for Bohm, I think, is an idea, that everything is connected, and where he was coming up with this sort of this theory of an implicate order, and that would I suppose for him, maybe like in a layman's term, it maybe sort of in a way makes it easier to understand how two particles can be linked on the other side of the universe, because everything is part of the same whole in some mind-blowing scientific way. So yeah, so again, so the Greek theory of the atom was still the idea that everything was all these different objects, however tiny, but these building blocks that everything was made from, but building blocks. And that sort of visualization is still goes on into modern science, even though they've got all these quantum physics and now plasma, all these things which are showing that things aren't solid like that. They're all different. Everything's energy, everything, these waveforms, and it's just how they manifest, to use a word that Liz hates, but she's not here. So but because these things are constantly moving, there's all these waves and energies. So again, like on a philosophical way of like, you can't have a rigid theory and say that's it, it's never going to change, that's the way it all works, there's no deviation, it will never change. You know, that's just on a human level, but as above, so below, on this quantum level, everything is movement. So I guess that's why I think this hollow movement concept, everything is like one continuous stream, to use another metaphor. Also within that, everything is part of the stream. So, you know, everything is all linked. And of course, it's all mutable, isn't it? Everything changes, and in terms of the physical makeup of everything, the matter, you know, that could, you know, die, get worn away, but then it transmits into something else. But nothing is static, and everything must keep moving, but it will always remain part of this universal whole of everything. He talks about the difference with Eastern religion and philosophy, where that does, traditionally at least, give primacy to this immeasurable, like something that's beyond measurement, beyond objectification, and that there is this sort of if you like, energy or spiritual connection of everything. So just to read a quote here while I gather my brain a little bit together, but when the whole field of measure is open to original and creative insight without any fixed limits or barriers, then our overall worldviews will cease to be rigid, and the whole field of measure will come into harmony as fragmentation within it comes to an end. But original and creative insight within the whole field of measure is the action of the immeasurable. For when such insight occurs, the source cannot be within ideas already contained in the field of measure, but rather has to be in the immeasurable, which contains the essential formative cause of all that happens in the field of measure. The measurable and the immeasurable are then in harmony, and indeed one sees that they are but different ways of considering the one and undivided whole. Now, this chimes with me of like William Blake, you know, a number of his quotes. As I say, there was definitely a mention briefly in passing of Blake in there, and also another book which I'll mention in a moment. But a big poem which I love, or it's a section of one, The Auguries of Innocence by William Blake, which you'll probably be familiar with. But to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. I suppose in a way that in a much more beautiful way than I can do, again, encapsulate, it's sort of like the hologram idea, and again, that concept of as above, so below. So the idea that the microcosm, the tiniest thing, a grain of sand, it is somehow linked to a whole world, and heaven in a wildflower, infinity in the palm of your hand. So that also goes in relation to time as well as to space and matter, and eternity in an hour. And so, yeah, I suppose that to me is, that to me does strike a chord. And I think sort of in essence, I do think that there's this interconnectedness of everything. And again, I think it's like all these things with the powers that shouldn't be, they try and corrupt everything, and they put things out there where they make them sound like it's something that's good. But as we know, like things with the sort of racial ideology type stuff, they promote something as being about oneness. Oh, we're all one people under the, you know, on the globe, and yet they emphasize racial difference along with all these other differences. So and things like, you know, they critical race theory, where they promote this as supposedly getting away from divisions and racism, but in actual fact it's creating divisions and conflict. So at every stage they're increasing fragmentation, but doing it in the name of wholeness. So I mean, to me, I think Bohm, I read that he actually did renounce Marxism around the time of the Hungarian uprising in the 50s. So I would think, as he seems like an intelligent guy and a caring guy, and especially with all these philosophical and scientific studies in against fragmentation, he would have seen that, you know, where this ideology, so what he was following or had followed, because he saw it as being a way of, you know, everyone coming together and working for the common good, in a social human version of wholeness. In actually, it was just being made another form of fragmentation, and just another way of people exerting power on other people, and people being commodified in a way. Although it was supposedly an anti-capitalist system, people were still units of production, but they were just being directed around what they did by a totalitarian government, rather than in our case, where they were being pushed around in sort of monetary forces, which themselves were governed by the people in power. How are we doing in the chat? I realise I'm probably waffling on a bit, so I hope you're having a good. Perhaps our consciousness is 21 grams of plasma, DJ. Well, yeah. I think you it could well be on something there. But yeah, I think I like the way that Bohm tries to explore different ideas, and maybe he's being overly daring in some ways, but he tries to sort of go out of obviously his accepted field of physics. He also was posting talk about ideas of changing our language. He came up with a concept called RIA mode. So that was looking at language, saying that in English anyway, it's probably probably the same for a lot of the major languages, but the noun is given the primary role in meaning rather than the verb. And what he's saying, things like when people say it is raining, it's like, well, what's it? It is raining. And it's better to say there is rain occurring. So he was sort of proposing a different formation of language. I don't suppose he was really very thinking that people would suddenly start completely reversing their way of speaking. But it is interesting. This goes into this other debate with linguistics, which again, the sort of if you like, the modern consensus on language is that language doesn't create thought, or it doesn't lead thought. Because there were hypotheses in the past. Sapir-Whorf is maybe the best known one. So I know at least one of them, I forget which, I think it was the Hopi tribe in North America. I might get that wrong, but it was a North American tribe, and there was also a foreword of this Bohm book on creativity, which is a collection of his essays. I think came out after he died, but the foreword is by a scientist. I can't find his name now. But anyway, a native, Lee Nickel, I think, but a Native American. But he was talking about how he had discussions with Bohm, and he was saying a lot of Bohm's theories coincided with a lot of Native American, if you want to call it philosophy or beliefs. So I think partly as well, this idea of a wholeness and things being in constant movement or flux. But as I say, I think there is definitely, at least with one or two of the tribes, this idea of a different way of speaking. So I can't remember if it was Sapir or Whorf who did studies. It's been sort of attacked since, and they said, everything was sort of attacked about it. So I don't know, that might well be valid criticism, but from what I remember, the idea was that their way of speaking about time was completely different. So they had a different way of describing how things happened, and he was saying that in itself led to them having a different philosophy about time. But the consensus now is from sort of modern linguists, I believe, is that thought comes first. But I don't know. Well, I think it must be. I can't see that there should be a rigid either or. I mean, I think we know that how things are phrased in language does influence thought, because that's why the people in power make so much attention to detail, to put out slogans and to phrase language in different ways, because they want to make people think and act in a certain way. So I think Bohm has a good point. I mean, people aren't going to suddenly change the way they speak, but I think it goes to show that this our ways of thought, which in themselves are this sort of fragmentary, lead to this fragmentation. You know, it's deep down in everything. It's in our language, as well as in our attitudes to science, as well as our social organization. It's all the same. And Bohm doesn't talk in these respects, but you know, I think maybe the way a lot of us think is that this isn't all coincidental, and it's been put in place from a long time back because they want that fragmentation, and you know, in many ways they're increasing that now. So yeah, it's the concept of everything being in flow, and this idea that science has been rigid, as also talked about that with Temple. I saw a quick clip on Twitter of a biochemist, David Rasnick, saying science died in the 1980s. Now we have dogma. And interestingly, the Bohm book, I think, came out in 1980. But I think he's got I've tried several times to listen to him talking with Krishnamurti, who was this sort of religious figure, quasi-religious figure that was so I think it was discovered by Annie Besant and her colleague, and it's all around this sort of theosophy group in India. And I know that many people think that they're, again, all part of the program. I don't know. Again, it's one of these things where Annie Besant, when I read things about her before I learned other things that I know, and to me, she seemed like a bit of a hero. Like she, you know, led this match girls strike, you know, to get them better paying conditions. So she had all that sort of foundation to her, and then she went to India, and then there was all this theosophical stuff, and I was thinking, blimey, you know, she's quite a girl. But again, maybe not everything is to what it seems. But yeah, the Krishnamurti Bohm talks, they're very slow. It's we've been watching Lord of the Rings a lot, because Liz has been into Lord of the Rings. I think basically it's all about the battle of good and evil. Oh yeah, Mari, hi. Yeah, Krishnamurti was meant to be the second coming of the Messiah. I think they just sort of discover him as a boy, like on a beach or something, and supposedly thought that he had some religious, you know, some spiritual essence about him, and then he was sort of groomed, may not be the right word, but you know, to become this sort of, like as Mari says, like a Messiah figure. But I think from something I've read about him in the past, he sort of rebelled about that over the years, and sort of, you know, started having a relationship with women, and you know, basically didn't want to be the Messiah. He just wanted to be a naughty boy. But yeah, it's just one of these things where it's yeah, two probably very interesting wise men talking, definitely, about big things, but they do take a long time to get there. Again, I would say it's I like the idea that hardcore quantum physicist is trying to have discussions with someone who's supposed to be on the sort of religious New Age side of things. Again, it's got him some stick and disrespect, if you like, from people in the scientific community. It's like, you're wasting your time talking to people like that. Can't be taken seriously as a scientist. But I think this is another one of Bohm's principles is dialogue, and obviously that's been a big thing from the Greeks. This idea of the Socratic dialogue. I don't know if Bohm sort of had to, maybe had some sort of slightly different ideas around it, but generally the idea, again, which I suppose comes back to this idea that you shouldn't have a rigid formation of a worldview or a philosophy or a scientific concept and just say, I'm not budging from that. This is how everything is. I'm not going to take any other theory on it. And the idea of a dialogue, which, again, I think makes, it's certainly a good way. I mean, yes, if everything was decided on in the manner of Bohm and Krishnamurti, then it would be like the Ents deciding whether they were going to attack Sauron. They would be going on discussing it forever. But in general, yes, dialogue is important, and again, it is how things should be. But again, only if it's not just like politicians talking in hot air, but they've got an agenda already set out before them, and they're not really going to, whatever's talked about at the end of the day, the agenda way is going to be rolled out either way. That's not a genuine dialogue. A dialogue should be two potentially opposing views and people talking them out, and hopefully reaching some other conclusion, or at least maybe a slight reappraisal of both people's worldview, to say, well, okay, maybe some of the things that I thought about, I can accept. There's maybe a position of movement on that, and I don't have to accept everything that I did before. You've made some good ideas. I don't know. I don't know what other people think. I suppose again, these things can be abused, and again, the ideas of dialogue can also be abused without getting anywhere. So Ledbetter. So was he Besant's? Was he a colleague there? Another one high up in the theosophy. But yeah, Alice Bailey, Lucifer Trust, Lucius. Yeah, I don't doubt DJ. Lots of messed up stuff in theosophy. I mean, that's things I've read about. Mark Windows has, I think, done a lot about this, and obviously it's influenced a lot of the New Age movement, which again has been twisted, and again has sort of come into the agenda. I know, Ben, you did many years ago, very interesting video when you went up talking about when you were in Findhorn, and your experiences there, and how that sort of disillusioned you into these. A lot of people were in that supposedly in that sort of New Age communities, which again is supposed to be about healing and reimagining society in the world. But in actual fact, so much of it has been just preempted, and it's just, or co-opted rather, and it's just being used to fuel the agenda. On an aside from that, actually, I remember at last year's Crafty Symposium. This year's coming up in a few days' time. But I wasn't directly talking to Sandy Adams, but I was just sat at a table in a pub with our friend Gemma, Ben, and and Sandy Adams was there, and she'd just been up to Findhorn doing talks with them, and that was interesting because he talks about Agenda 30, and you're probably aware of Sandy Adams a lot, but the very good talks breaking down about all the different agendas and how, you know, how it's all unfolding and what they've got planned. But I heard her saying that the impression she got, it was quite very in the balance, that people would find on sort of 50-50 almost, in terms of people that were of our mindset, where awareness of what was being done, but another 50% where they were thinking, you know, a lot of the agenda was a good thing, you know, and it was the whole thing, environment, save the planet, you know, that's what we want, and you know, it's a global climate crisis, etc., and things like that. So, but yeah, I seem to remember, I think she was saying sort of 50-50. But yeah, I've gone off to another tangent. Nothing changes there. But yeah, it's something I do want to look into more on theosophy. Because I noticed actually Robert Temple, who obviously talking about last week, he's done a couple of videos with different theosophy societies in different countries, and they're on YouTube. You can find those. So he's and he was talking about his sympathy with theosophy. So I don't know. I mean, I'm interested in reading more about these things. Obviously, as I've been researching these different subjects for talks, you know, I've come across people like the Theosophists and others, and with a lot of these other groups, whether it's, you know, the Freemasons, you know, because I've been going, you know, from the John Dee talk right at the start of the talks, and how he's bound up with all these groups, or should I say that, you know, potentially a lot of his writings and philosophies and stuff, you know, led to some of these things like the Rosicrucians. And I know Israel Diego Rivera's, you know, often referring to John Dee. Mentioned it was his birthday, actually, 13th of July, when the old DT thing happened. So I don't know, but then I don't know if it's all, again, don't know if it's all a bad thing, or whether it's, again, if it's a case of there's some good there, and there's been some good people, good, positive, well-intentioned, and interesting information, and again, there's been people that have twisted it, perverted it, used it for bad purposes. So my good lady wife has just staggered in.
I'm staggered in.
Staggered in with a glass of wine.
No.
Hello.
There's no wine.
No wine. You've hidden it over there. Oh, you're coming in, eh?
Get my bloody way.
Oh, right.
Right. You're still banging on about him.
I've been banging on about Bohm, yeah, but feel free. I've probably bored everyone to tears, so feel free to come in with your inimitable stuff.
You've gone off on a tangent.
I've gone off on a tangent, but that's not a bad thing. It's got people talking.
Get back to your one.
Well, yeah. So I mean, but yeah, I don't know about the theosophy idea, but
Mommy got me a present.
Very nice present.
But we didn't know what it was from. I was very surprised. I'm going to show you it.
Yeah. Yeah, go there.
Ask them if they want to come in. Just do it. Ask them if they want a link to come in and chat with us. Just ask them.
Oh, well, you probably heard that. But if you want to come in and chat, we can send you a link. Our Green Tea said there have been some good lectures on YouTube on the Theosophy channel. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of good information there.
Look what Mari got me.
Yeah.
We didn't know who it was from.
Mm-hmm.
So we were confused. Look at that.
It's beautiful.
I know, it's amazing. Thanks, Murray. We didn't know who it was from. It's amazing.
Came out of the ether.
So, wait a minute. I'm going to get a thing.
I would think it would be, again, I think these things can be explored more, but this thing we're talking about plasma and now Bohm's theory of the implicate order, this connection of everything being one whole, and you've got things like quantum entanglement. And to me, that can provide scientific basis for things like tarot, because, otherwise, skeptics are like, well, that's nonsense. How can just, you picking out three random cards?
It's just a Twinkly Skywater.
Twinkly Skywater, that's...
I'm not being funny. No. They're just copying us.
True. Liz was the original, although, because all time is all relative, past and present.
They're just copying us.
So the fact that Liz had said it later than these people...
doesn't mean that they come up with it first.
No, it's because it's all time present at the same time.
Dickheads.
Yeah. What's happening here?
I'm plugging it in.
Oh, it's plugging it in.
I'm going to put a link.
She's coming in.
I'm going to put a link in the thing, and you lot have got to come in and talk. Ben's put it in capitals, so he means it.
Do you know the connection between Bohm and Anthony Peake's simulation theory? Oh,
wait a minute. Don't look at me. I'm doing something.
I don't, Ben. Is that something you can elucidate?
Well, elucidate in here.
You can come on and talk about it if you want, but
yeah, go on. I'm gonna. What is it? Paste. Get in. Give us a bloody break. Come on, everybody. Get your
simulation theory.
I can't be bothered with it tonight, but I'm here. I've just fucked my picture up.
Oh, that's why you've broken away from it. Oh.
But,
you've got you can show some of your other good stuff. Oh, it'll be available on the Crafty Nihilist Etsy.
Come on.
There's some beautiful stuff being
Get in. Green tea, don't you bloody boss him about you get in as well.
Oh, Ben's not sober enough, he says.
Get in. We've seen you drunk before, Ben.
Well, that will be something maybe for the future we could talk about with about Anthony Peake stuff. But to me, these things, more and more, there is scientific basis for so much of spiritual thought, so many of these philosophical theories, but so much of modern science, because that's the thing, science, apart from the science that we know from the nonsense, but it's still in the public point of view and everything they push. It's like the people like Richard Dawkins who are would do something on TV saying dowsing's a load of rubbish. But as I said to you in the temple talk, there was hardcore scientist Freeman Cope who was employed by naval intelligence and was talking about a scientific basis for dowsing. So like that quote that I started with, from which this book was in the 1980s, the late 1980s, it actually came out. But yeah, science itself needs to be open to these ideas, and so much of it's not, even when so many of the findings within science are 100% giving validation, I think, to us loonies.
Don't forget to finish your talk then.
Well, I'm sort of running out of things a little bit, but I could read lots of words, but that might kill people off. Oh, is someone popping in? Ben's coming in. Right, what do I do, Liz?
Pissed his arseholes.
Hey, Ben. Right, quick.
Relax.
I'm right. Well, yeah, you're the technical.
Look, you just hover over him.
Hello.
Hey, Ben. Good to see you, mate.
Cheers. I'm drinking invisible wine.
Hey,
you're not the only one.
Yeah. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. I'm going to go and get the big... Oh, no.
Oh, well. You can see Russell through my wine. Look, I do that. You can see Russell. Yeah, there you go.
All right, I'm just going to get some headphones, Ben.
My head becomes invisible. Look, you can see Russell.
All right, Ben. Start talking about Anthony Peake and the.
All right, yeah. Green tea, don't worry about it. Green tea says wasn't being bossy. Don't worry, green tea. It's all right. No, Anthony Peake is very interesting because he believes he has his own version of the simulation hypothesis, which is where what you see around you is not really real. I mean, in a sense, we are in some kind of matrix, like structure. It's some kind of matrix, maybe a computer simulation or something like that. Obviously, not in the conventional sense. Something a lot more sophisticated. Hang on, but you see, I mean, this is not a new idea. I mean, this is like basically Plato's cave. We use the term computer simulation as a kind of analogy in the same way Plato used the idea of the cave as an analogy. But what it was, there was he believes that you essentially you have a lot. You live your life, and at the end of your life, what a lot of people experience in the near-death experience is like a life review. And Anthony says that this is kind of what happens is you go back and you start your life all over again, the same life you have now, and you do it slightly differently. You might like for example, you might do better at school in your next life. Your daemon is your higher self, and your eidolon is your lower self. It's your conscious mind. The daemon is like your superego or your id, whatever it is. I don't know. These Freudian terms baffle me. But he said that it may be slightly different. You'll do a different job, for example. You may die younger. You may die older. You'll get different illnesses. You might marry somebody else. Things like that.
Bloody hipster.
And he said, but I mean, I did ask him. I said, this sounds a little bit boring, going over the same track all over and over again. And he said, well, you don't do it permanently. You do it for a certain number of times. And then you move on to a different life. So, in a sense, the idea you have different lives and have different incarnations in different worlds, it's actually Anthony gets a lot of stick from the skeptics, and he gets a lot of stick from the people who believe in past lives and things like that. But these two are not mutually exclusive; they can work together. But one thing he says is he calls it the Bohmian IMAX. Referring to David Bohm. When I read the book, I thought it was Bohemian IMAX. I misread it. It's actually Bohmian IMAX. And I can't remember the details, but he says it's an adaptation of the Cartesian theatre. The Cartesian. Let me look this up. Hang on a second. Sorry, I've had a few drinks. I'm a bit slurred.
No, you're doing well. You're doing well, Ben. You're doing well, mate.
I'm still recovering from the operation.
Thank you for bringing me up.
Cartesian theatre. Yeah, Cartesian theatre. It's an adaptation on that. It's a derisive term by philosopher Daniel Dennett. Oh right, yes, Daniel Dennett. That's right. It's a joke about Daniel Dennett because he had a book called Consciousness Explained, which is a very brazen title, rather a lot of hubris in it. He calls it Cartesian materialism, where he considers to be the often unacknowledged remnants of the Cartesian dualism of modern materialist theories of the mind. Because Descartes was a dualist, he believed that there was a non-physical aspect of the mind that interacted via the pineal gland, and it was when you say I think, therefore I am. That's really how that's the principle of what your consciousness is. But you see, in this idea, there's like a little man inside your head, or the consciousness really plays the role of something. It's almost like watching a TV screen or a theatre, and everything you see in front of you is like actors on stage. It's not real. To use a modern analogy, it's like a TV screen, or a cinema screen. The problem is then
Plato's cave.
Yeah,
it's similar to that, but see, this was something that Daniel Dennett thought didn't really make much sense, and he makes a good point, because what he says, well, if there's a little homunculus, your consciousness acts as a homunculus watching a screen. Well, what's the homunculus got inside its mind?
Right.
So you get a kind of infinite regress.
Oh God,
it's
yeah.
like a levitating super homunculus, or it's homunculi all the way down.
Right.
A what? A what? Homunculus? Say that again. A super what? A what?
Homunculus is like a little.
Monkeys.
It's like a small copy of yourself.
Yeah, but
It's-
what did you say? A super
Let me
something something
Share the
homunculus.
screen. Here we go. Is this a good picture? Can I share this?
Hi, Diego. Everybody go and watch Diego. Ben, you won't agree with
Diego
it, but
Rivera here. Oh, hello.
yeah, I agree with what he's saying about Trump. You, Ben,
might have to-
everybody except Ben,
Right.
go and watch Diego's videos about Trump.
All right, hang on. Here we go. Here we
Ben
go.
sharing the screen.
Right. This picture, see, this is you. There's your homunculus inside. This is how consciousness works according to Descartes. Watching this screen here of a fried egg.
Yeah.
The man himself is looking at a real fried egg, apparently. Although, for all you know, this regress could go the other way as well. It could.
Well, there's no such thing as a real fried egg, is there? There's no such thing as the real because we only experience it in our homunculus. So the real doesn't exist.
If you look at the fried egg closely enough, you'll find it's made of atoms. The atoms are made of various subatomic particles. The molecules are made of atoms. The molecules, atoms.
Yeah, but you're still not experiencing the real egg, though, Ben, are you? Because
No.
you're experiencing it through your.
When you taste it, you may like it or dislike it, but it's you don't. The taste is completely and utterly hypothetical to you. It's subjective to you.
I mean,
But
it
you
might
see,
be green for all we bloody know.
Well,
Our eyes might change it completely.
who knows? I mean, you get into the realm where you can't disprove solipsism. I can't prove that everything is that, including you. None, you guys don't exist. So.
Oh no, not solipsism. Have you ever heard what's his name? Shouty man. What's his name? You're all
Tony.
Dolts. No,
Nobody learns.
Passio. No,
I'm
Passio, not Passio on solipsism. Well, he said that is the Satanists have got rules, and he should know because he was a Satanist, and one of them is never be a solipsist. That's like their biggest rule. Don't do that because it makes you, for want of a better word, not so nihilistic. You don't bother. I can relate.
Well, yeah, I mean, by definition, solipsists are narcissists because you're the only conscious being in the universe. So, and everything else is just kind of almost your creation. I mean, I don't believe in solipsism. I mean, when I found out there was a solipsist club, that kind of made me a bit cynical about whether even they believe it.
Well, they all just stand individually in their own little place. They don't actually talk to each other.
If solipsism were real, you'd be like the king of Pointland in the Flatland book, where
For anybody who doesn't know, but I'm sure you will do whatever it ism. You don't believe that anybody exists except you.
There is only you.
Well, somebody's making a fucking mess in my sink every bloody day, and it ain't
in the
me.
Cartesian theory, it is just you. But you see, there's a guy here. He's all his sensory input is coming from this TV. Everything he hears is coming from these microphones that are beside the ears of the person he's inside, and the eyes are basically connected to this camera that's projecting a picture onto this TV screen. And of course, but then inside the head of the homunculus, you have this other little homunculus watching another TV screen. Inside, then you get another one and another one. So
I think it's a bit too complicated.
Yeah, and Anthony thinks he's explained this. I can't remember his exact words. Let me just come off share. Here we go.
To me, though, in a way, it could be seen as like
I do this.
The ultimate extreme of that fragmentation I was talking about. Because if everyone is just their own object, if you like, or got their own world, then that is the ultimate fragmentation. That nothing. I would say the Bohmian thing is the opposite of that, in that everything is linked and is part of everything else. But a bit like the Plato's Cave, that I did read an analogy of Bohm's idea of the implicate and explicate, which is similar. Like again, the implicate order is like the projector, and the images on the screen are the explicate order, which is the world, if you like. So
that'd be slightly different, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that may be what Anthony's talking about more. It's not that consciousness is not like an object in itself confined to your own person. It's more a product, even if it's just a side effect of the universal function itself.
Right.
And that sounds more like what you meant there, Mark, if I understand correctly. And that's more kind of thing that that's more the kind of thing that that Anthony meant by the Bohmian IMAX. See, because I mean, Daniel Dennett his book Consciousness Explained is extraordinary when you consider for thousands of years throughout history, people have been trying to explain this thing. That is the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah.
Dennett explains it as basically that there is no consciousness. It's essentially it's a story. The very fact that you even exist is a story your brain tells itself. It's almost like a kind of a fable. And as Anthony actually said to Daniel once, "Who writes your books then, Dan?"
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bohm was very much about consciousness and thought and how we come to have the worldview that we do. And but yeah, I would say it's very much anti-solipsism because it's you shouldn't be rigid, you know, and everything is part of everything else, and it's a constant flow. So it's
solipsism on a theoretical level, it's complete nonsense.
Yeah.
On a practical level, it's actually, I think it comes with some pathology because, of course, if you believe other people don't exist, you can go around like kicking them over when you're crossing the street and just kick them out of the way, you know, because they're not real. And it's like they're like characters in your dream. This is what Daniel says. He says here he believes that consciousness arises from interaction of physical and cognitive processes in the brain. Now, that's not very original. That's your standard skeptic materialistic model of consciousness, that it's a product of brain function. But Dennett describes consciousness as an account of the various calculations occurring in the brain at close to the same time. He compares consciousness to an academic paper that has been developed and edited in the hands of multiple people at one time, and the multiple drafts theory of consciousness. In this analogy, the paper exists even if there's no single unified paper. When people report on their inner experiences, Dennett considers their reports to be more like theorizing than describing. Now, Andy Clark has said something like that. He believes that consciousness is kind of like telling people a story. And he says, and this is like, obviously this has been very heavily criticized. Again, it's, he essentially, he's reducing the sense that of qualia, the hard problem of consciousness, to a delusion. It's something you don't have to even address because it's not really real. You're not real. You think you are, but you're not, which sounds contradictory. Indeed, David Chalmers has said that it is a contradiction. Every time you use like the word "I" or something, who's saying that then? I mean, how did he come up with this idea of to explain who he is if he doesn't exist? You know, it's nuts. But I mean, I wish I was. If I didn't have so much wine, I could probably think of it in more detail. This is why I never drink before I do my own presentations.
Well, you can always come and do a talk with us another time about it, Ben. But,
now we're back.
Yeah,
we were at YouTube cave.
Mari's saying
YouTube Alcatraz. Yeah. Was it a long cold swim across the bay?
Mari's saying atheist materialism is the assumed paradigm in all this scientific theorizing. I suppose it is that thing because it's that trap, and it's this idea that someone's got the ultimate idea of everything, and like this is the way everyone should think, and you know they have all the answers. Science has all the answers, sort of thing, you know. And it's
you said it yourself earlier on, Mark, that you know that this is why Bohm wasn't popular. I mean, obviously because politically he was very left wing. But I mean, to be honest, if they kicked all the communists out of the Manhattan Project, there wouldn't have been a Manhattan Project. there was so many of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yes, but he was very left wing. So that obviously politically, and of course, much later after the war, that became even more tricky politically. But the fact that he had this, he wasn't a complete materialist, would have been, and you know, people just think, well, you're going to go to church next. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like,
yeah.
I mean,
I really like that. What Diego just wrote is consciousness and alien. I really like that, actually.
Well, it's interesting, like the Robert Temple talk did last week. I don't know if you heard that. You know, he's talking on plasma, but he's talking about these giant clouds of plasma, sort of gas that between Earth and the Moon. The Kordylewski clouds. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce it, but they're something like 9 times the size of the Earth, and he was saying that he thinks they could be like a giant brain essentially, or a giant computer, like all because it's got all this plasma, these crystals, and he was saying it could be like a neural network, like an enormous brain that was billions of years old, 9 times the size of the Earth. And he was saying that could be a consciousness, you know, that it knows everything about us, and maybe they even help create us. So that could be like this sort of giant alien consciousness sort of thing, you know, in plasma.
Yeah, I haven't watched the video yet, but I do think it's seen as if a brain, for example, a person's brain is a very, very complicated set of nerve cells, from which an infinite amount of electrical connections work, in essentially like circuits and a circuit board in a computer. But it's very, very complicated. I mean, it could even be like a quantum computers. But presumably, like if that could happen, or that could occur in other systems as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be a biological a neural net. It could be it could be something in plasma. And Arthur C. Clarke has written some stories about plasma beings and things like that living in the sun.
Maybe this cloud plasma thing is the original homunculus. Maybe it's the first one.
Well, I mean, because what he was saying
Or
as
the
well,
only one.
this idea, you know, plasma is also within all of us. So again, that could equate again to this, what Bohm's talking about, implicate, explicate, and that we're all part of this wholeness. And, you know, the matter comes out of this implicate order, which could be plasma, and retains part of the wholeness. It's never separated from that. So maybe we're connected to these giant clouds, and it's all part of this consciousness.
Well, that's what it says at the beginning of that plasma. I've only read about like 3 pages of that plasma book, but doesn't it say that there is a thing coming out of our heads that connects us to the giant plasma? You didn't talk about that.
I know a bit about Robert Temple. I mean, I've not read his book, but I've seen some of his lectures. My friend Tina has got all his books and knows a lot about him. But
it's fascinating. Yeah, I do recommend it.
It's interesting what Green teaches. Maybe our brains are more like antenna instead of storage devices. That's what we tune into. I think, it could be that we are connected to I mean, like the analogy of the radio set picking up consciousness. Consciousness is something that's transmitted, and we pick it up like a radio receiver. This is why you could alter, you know, in a sense, when you take like, for example, a mind-altering drug in Minecraft, ladies and gents. I don't want to get these guys another bad. If you take something like that, it's hypothetically, if you were, don't do it though. Don't do it.
Don't do it, kids. Just say no.
He would. It's almost like tuning the dial, retuning the dial. That's what Graham Hancock and other people who and Stanislav Grof and Rick Strassman have talked about. That's why you perceive the world differently. You even see different things when you take some of these substances. You know, it's not just from substances. You can have people who've had a stroke or have brain damage of some kind, or they're under enormous stress, or they're very thirsty or very tired. They can have like altered states of consciousness.
It can explain the paranormal and UFO sightings as well, Ben, because it's like almost like BBC Two is blurred into BBC One sort of thing.
It could be that some of these phenomena are only visible but to certain people at certain times. Although some of them seem to have a physical presence. Not all of them do. Some of them, for example, someone in a room might see a ghost and the others might not.
Yeah. I know some societies or some religions or something or another think that the hair is an antenna. That's why you don't cut it. Sorry about that, Ben.
I'm completely. I've got complete and utter blackout. Then I have,
Yeah. Well, I know somebody said, I can't remember who it was now, but that's why they shave the hair off the minute you go into the army, because they don't want you to. I don't know something about the hair helping.
Like in that,
with something.
Like in the opening scene of Full Metal Jacket, when they're all having their heads shaved. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like.
A funny thing about the Vietnam War, the Amerindians who were drafted, they let them keep their hair long, and everyone thought, I mean, technically this was because apparently it was a religious thing. It was because of religious sensibilities. However, they seem to they seem to be able to sort of detect things. They get a funny feeling like they're walking. Oh my God, there's snipers behind that bush, and they can't see them. No, they're there. I can feel them.
Yeah, I've heard that for a few different
things. They saved a lot of lives by that, and eventually, when they saved enough lives, and they worked out the commanders just said, "Oh, these guys are obviously very useful," And they said, "Oh, it's our hair, does it? You see, our hair." And, like in Avatar, do you remember those these long hairs, these little ponytails at the back,
Yeah.
which connect.
Well,
to the
Hindu people, they wear the turban, but underneath that, they've got very long hair, aren't they? Turban Hindu men.
Yeah, DJ has a bald on top, mullet at the back. Look, so that's part of his communication antenna.
So's Ben if he turns around.
But
Oh, you've ruined it.
but
Oh, you haven't got your hats on. That's what's different.
I remember another great philosopher hearing him talk. Funny enough, not about substances, but Keith Richards, and he was talking about how people have writer's block,
substances,
trying to create stuff. But he was saying that's because people are like they've got to force it out of them, like it's in the brain. But in actual fact, you're like a receiver, and so you should just open yourself up to it coming through. You know, that was the great Keith Richards who said that.
I think so. Look, Keith Richards probably took too many of the wrong substances during the course.
He did do a lot of substances,
yeah. But you know, he did. That's actually very interesting because other people have come to that same realization. Kind of independently, almost. Yeah.
I think that's fascinating. What green tea's just wrote.
Yeah, Jill Bolte Taylor.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I've seen that book's fascinating, and her lectures.
I want to read that. I've heard about it, and I've heard about her, and
well, she's like a neuroscientist, and
the experience she had when she had that stroke was just like amazing, wasn't it?
Wow,
it's very weird because she
didn't know that.
It was in the left side of her brain, so she firstly she couldn't speak. I mean, she would just go on the phone and she'd like. I've known people who've had strokes who've done this, and she in her mind she'd be speaking normally. She'd hear herself speaking normally to someone on the phone, but they would only hear her going like that, and things like that. She'd read something, but she could see the letters on a page in a book, for example, but they wouldn't make any sense. They looked like Korean or Japanese. She couldn't make them out. But at the same time, then she had this incredible Kundalini experience as a result of having the left brain shut down and just having that right brain energy on its own. I mean, it's not to belittle it because she had to have major surgery to remove because she had this hemorrhagic stroke. And she spent the next couple of years learning how to talk and walk again. It was quite shocking for her, but
so she was aware of the conversation inside of her body system, like listening to a foreman calling out orders. How amazing is that? So she was so in tune with her body that she understood the language of her body, the body language.
But I suppose that's an incredible, just showing that we've got all these parts within a body, and that they all communicate with each other.
Yeah,
but it's
and we
part
know
one
that
whole.
they do.
Yeah,
but we've never actually heard them go, "Here,
no,
George."
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Well, it's funny that my state of mind seems to affect my body very much. I've had I get illnesses at certain points in time.
Oh yeah, Christ,
very
tell
often
me about
connected
it.
to, and it's very often connected to something I'm going through, like a mental turmoil of some kind.
100%.
When my daughter was being born, I had the most horrible tonsillitis of a type I've never had before. I had ulcerative tonsil. I've never felt like that before in my life. And I suffer from a lot of eczema. I still get it a little bit, like dry skin problems, things like that. And it's a lot of other things like that. And I know what the cause is. I know what it's caused by.
Yeah, I mean, and just on a scientific level, we produce different hormones depending on what mood we're in, Like I've got fibromyalgia and I think it's trauma induced. And since I've given up work, I'm not really in as much pain. I'm not in as much stress. I'm not producing as much, is it cortisol or whatever, this horrible chemical that goes through your body when you're stressed. Well, I mean, why wouldn't it all be connected? I don't understand why it wouldn't be connected, to be honest.
DJ was asking if anyone's been ill in the last couple of weeks. Well, I know Gary Robinson's been ill, hasn't he?
Yeah, for ages.
Yeah.
But
there's so many. We get every time there's chemtrails, we get a cold.
Yeah, there's sort of an ongoing.
Last night. I was doing a
really
tour
bad
last night. Yeah, it really. I mean, the weather's completely changed today. It was like clouding over, a bit rainy.
There's so many fucking chemtrails at the moment everywhere. And I try not to go out when they're too bad because I know I'm going to come back ill.
Yeah, it's like Mark. Actually, we noticed that last night during the tour because we did the Oxford tour last night with Mark. There'll be a video of that soon.
That's his second one, isn't it?
Yeah, and he said, "What's chemtrails? What do you reckon it's going to be colder tomorrow?"
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, going back to what you were saying about your mind and the connection with the body and how you feel. Obviously, I mean, because obviously the whole thing about a placebo effect, just shows
true.
that there's a thing where people have a state of mind where they believe something's curing them, and then that in itself can actually produce a cure. And just that there's that thing built within science and medicine that they know that that's a thing, so they have to. Well, they supposedly have to do it if they're testing it right. They have to do tests with placebos to rule out the psychological aspect of someone being cured just by thinking they are. I mean, that you just boil that down, and that's within science, and that's showing that just purely by the power of your mind.
Well, the power of prayer as well. I'm not a Christian anymore, but there is something to be said about the power of positive thinking.
Oh, definitely. That's why I like Patch Adams, the film. That's one of the best Robin Williams films. Hello, Margaret.
I haven't seen it.
Hi, Margaret.
He plays. It's based on a true story about a guy who he went to medical school. He himself was a psychiatric patient suffering from chronic depression. He attempted suicide at one point, but then he finds a way to help himself by helping others, and he does it by making people laugh. And of course, Robin Williams is such a good comedian. It was a perfect person to play that role. It's a very good film, really good.
I'd like to see it, actually. I've never seen that. I mean, Dead Poets Society was always one that had a powerful effect on me.
That was great. And you know what, Robin Williams, of course, he's kind of role cast into these kinds of films and playing this kind of character. And this is no different. So the plot you'll be familiar with, because it's pretty much the same as nearly all the plots of Robin Williams' type films. But yeah, it's a great film. I love it. I really enjoyed it. He uses laughter to heal. He set up something called the Gesundheit Clinic, where he brought people in and he entertains them, with comedy shows and things like that. And that's why when I was a hospital porter, I tried to do that myself. I tried to be that kind of porter, with people when I was pushing people around in their wheelchairs and things. That's what I tried to be.
That's good. I mean, that makes a huge difference.
No, it does, and I should know because I've been in and out of bloody healthcare the last 3 months. It makes all the difference who's helping you and supporting you. Doesn't matter what they give you or what's going on. I came away different when I got a kind, because I have to go and get this dressed every single day. I've done now for nearly 3 months, pretty much, innit?
Yeah.
And if I get a bad one, I will worry about it until I see her, won't I? And what does that do? That makes me hurt. That actually makes my wound hurt more. But if I know I've got one of the nice nurses coming up, I'm a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, my mum didn't get on with one of her doctors because he wasn't unpleasant to her, but he was a bit too brusque and a bit too harsh with her.
I've had so many for the last 3 months.
Unsympathetic, and as a result, her treatment wasn't as good with this guy.
Exactly. Yeah. I've seen somebody different near enough for 3 months solid, pretty much. And I can always, whenever, I stopped actually going, probably to my detriment at the weekend, because I wasn't sure what I was going to get at the hospital, because my surgery wasn't open in the week. So they send me at the hospital at Chippenham Hospital, and oh my God.
Which I suppose is another thing, we know what they're doing with medicine, like everything else. I suppose it goes back to what I was talking before about this idea of fragmentation and again, this
social distancing.
But again, you get the idea that some of the people, like the nurses that you didn't like, it was ones, the newer ones, and they were trying to they thought they had the qualifications and they were
all book knowledge,
but they weren't caring, and they weren't, they were trying to do whatever the modern, or they thought the right theory of how to do something was, but they weren't engaging with the human.
But then you'd get the old school ones that were like my age and hadn't gone on to do their top-notch nurse training. They just knew how to be with people, so they got a better result.
But they've been looked down on probably by the
Green Tea says it very well. He says, just someone touching you with love makes all the difference. Yes, exactly. And there's a quote, there's a wonderful line in Patch Adams. Patch is talking to another medical student, and this guy says, I've got this patient and she won't eat. I can't make her eat, he says. I know everything there is to know about medicine. I out-diagnose the top consultant here, because this guy's a real sort of like workhorse when it comes to studying. This guy, it was But he says, but I can't make her eat. He says, you can do it because you understand people. You like them and they like
exactly.
you.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
So DJ said he stopped getting blood tests because the bloodsucker at the health centre was a brutal asshole. I know. I stopped going at the weekend to have my dressing changed because the stress, and even the nice nurse down the box surgery said there's no point you going then. The stress is going to cause you more anxiety and less healing. There's no point you going if you're going to have anxiety a week about going up there. She said there's no point.
Yeah. Margaret saying my dad was in hospital a few weeks ago. Bedside manner seems a thing of the past. Yeah, it's all the dehumanizing thing that they're doing because they're making. I mean, it's getting to an extreme now. This whole fragmentation and mechanization idea. They're just this description. Oh yeah, humans are just like machines, computers, or whatever. And it's just becoming more and more
impersonal. Controversial.
Well, what makes why change to like
before I do? Don't forget, Mark's got a channel, so go and.
Oh Christ!
You're
going to get us banned again, Liz.
I'm going to get us banned.
You're going to get us banned again.
I've been in hospital a lot. You're bored of hearing it, but I'm not being funny. It helped when I could understand what fucking language they were saying. There, I said it. It helped when I knew what fucking language the fucking nurse was saying. I'm sorry, but it did help me.
Well, obviously, communication is massive.
What? I sounded like a complete fucking racist, but I didn't have a fucking clue what she was going on about.
You need more.
It had something to do with my health. I needed to know.
You need more than just basic fluency if you're gonna do that kind of job. You're not there to ask people, the way to the railway station in a very loud voice. You're there. You have to discuss complex matters with them to do their treatment, but also deep and meaningful
medicine.
Matters. Yeah,
I was on fucking fentanyl and morphine for Christ's sake. If I'd have got that shit wrong, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know what? It got worse during the time I was there. I mean, I've been out of it now 11 years, but it got worse during the time I was there. During the course of my career, it got worse and worse and worse, and it was really quite worrying because obviously, like I found that the human side of things was being sucked out of the NHS. In my the morale of the staff at my hospital plummeted.
Yeah,
it really did, and this means that I'm got to the point now. Unless I had something life threatening, or I was in so much pain or discomfort I couldn't function.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even go and see my GP.
But that's why my back got so bad because I put up with this shit on my back for 20 years, and to the point where I couldn't walk. And then
sometimes you have no choice.
No, I had no choice. And then they cut something out of me so deep. That's why it's taken so long. It's got to heal from the bottom up. It can't heal over, or it'll come back. So it's got to grow new cells about 2 inches of. You don't want to know.
It's too late now. They do.
I've heard worse. Much worse.
To be fair, I refuse to look at it. So Mark made a sculpture for me out of an old box to show me the length and the depth because I refused to look at it, but I wanted to know what was going on. So I demanded he make a sculpture.
I was going to get some more wine. I'll be back in a minute.
I'm going to have a wee.
Yeah. Mark,
over
to you. Shut this I've got no trousers on. So I've got no trousers.
Ben's got no trousers on, everybody. It's all right. He's merged in with the alien. On that bombshell. Well, they left me to it. Right, okay. DJ, we are all on a human farm. Watch The Jones Plantation. Thank you, DJ. Another film to check out. Oh, Margaret, keep me company. Right, how is everyone doing? Ben is in his shorts. Well, let's hope so.
This is what I'm like, guys. This is what I'm like. Yeah, this is what I'm like when I'm not like broadcasting. Or I'm not. When I don't have to be professional and broadcast or to do a show or something like that. It's what you're seeing me as I am normally, and I'm not like that. Hat on.
That was freaky. That was freaky though, because your background is basically a wall of your room. Yeah. I didn't realise it was, like a put on background. So when you suddenly disappeared, I thought you had been taken up into the plasma realm. You literally.
Yeah, it's just like the green screen effect. But I did.
Yeah,
my old
with your own.
Yeah, I just found rather sitting in my studio area for a long time is difficult. So I tend to like.
We don't usually drink. Well, you do. Okay. What? I don't.
Only weekends. Cheers.
I don't usually.
Where's your wine? I'm in your glass. Oh, it's there.
You just poured into it.
Oh, hold on, let's just say cheers.
Cheers again.
Yakada.
Yeah. Cheers, everybody. Happy Saturday.
Cheers.
Oh, glad you could all join us.
Saturday, everyone.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, the sculpture wasn't very good, green tea, I have to say, but
Well, it showed. Well, I wish I'd never asked him to make it after he made it because it was massive. Anyway, let's stop talking about my injuries.
I hope you get better soon, Liz. I do.
Oh, fuck it. I'm sick of it, Ben. I'm sick of it.
Oh, hello, Cosmic. I didn't realise you were there, my friend.
Cheers.
Hello, Cosmic Twilight. Well, I actually saw Cosmic Twilight earlier, yeah, but it's an interesting subject, isn't it? Oh, I saw Anthony Peake. He was at Contact in the Desert. I mean, so UFO.
Yeah.
It's like a generally alternative one too. And Anthony was there. He did an interesting talk. And
well, we wanted to come and see him that time when you did that book launch, but it was in the week and we couldn't get up to bloody Oxford.
Yeah, he'll be doing another one. I mean, Anthony will do another one. But
tell him not to do it in the bloody week.
Oh, well, yeah, he should. But he writes so many books. I mean, he writes.
I do need to read his book about Philip K. Dick, because I've also got the exegesis of Philip K. Dick, which is all the.
I bought you that.
Yes,
oh.
and I.
No, I bought you the. Didn't I buy you the Anthony Peake book?
No, you bought that for one of the boys.
Oh, I bought it for one of the boys.
Yeah, but again, it's another thing for a future talk maybe. But fascinating again. Someone who had this connection with something, like so many, Tesla in different fields, but feel they've got a connection with some other, whether it's getting messages from something, whether it's, described as like an alien or, some sort of message, like, what we were going on to, talking about before, this idea of consciousness and where it comes from, whether it comes from like a antenna from somewhere else. So many of these geniuses say that their groundbreaking thoughts have come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
well, Tesla did as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that. Like a lot of people who, especially artistic people and scientific people, may understand that they, ideas seem to come into their heads from outside.
Yeah.
It's described as channeling your muse. That's what in the old days, which I think is Latin. That's where the word music comes from muse. And your muse was your creative spirit.
Yeah, on my novel, The Individual, there's the word muse is something that keeps resonating through. But yeah, this
it was the muses, wasn't it? It was supposed to be people or something, Greeks. The muses.
Yeah, so that was inspiration for creativity from one of the gods. I can't remember which now.
It's called Pinterest now.
they had like they'll just get flashes of insight. The most famous one is one of Archimedes' moments was when he was sitting in the bath one day and he realized that the water level rose when he was around him, because he was just puzzling over a problem about how to measure volume in an uneven object. I mean, it's easy to measure volume in a cube. You just get a tape measure and you measure it along each of its edges. What about an uneven structure? How do you measure the volume? And he suddenly worked out, well, I'm displaced. The water I'm displacing is the volume that's under the water. And he was so excited. He jumped out of the bath and he ran down the street shouting, "Eureka, Eureka," which means I found it. And he was so excited he didn't even bother getting dressed.
It was almost like your moment, but there with your trousers not on, Ben. It was like
20 minutes ago.
but yeah, I mean, I this idea of I think Green Tea mentioned something about, or maybe it was Linda. Sorry, I do apologise, about imagination and consciousness. I mean, Blake talked about imagination. Linda. Sorry, Linda. Yeah, imagination being synonymous with this spiritual. And Blake also wrote about, like, I can't remember the exact words, but traveling over known lands, you're not going to see anything new. And again, it goes to this idea that you need to maybe to like try and see outside the box, I suppose, and again, it's this idea you can't have a rigid thought, like everything's been prescribed before and you've got to just follow this formula. But yeah, I mean, more and more I'm starting to get to this idea, that this idea of there being this from plasma, that there's some that's maybe where the consciousness lies, that like a universal consciousness that sometimes we tap into or comes through us, sort of thing, you know.
Well, I've been watching Lord of the Rings on loop for the last 2 weeks because universal consciousness. So you talk about archetypes, right? And we talk about gods and pagan gods and channeling. Obviously, we didn't believe that there was an actual person called Odin, or, you know, we're channeling what that archetypally, if that's a word, means to us. Okay. So I said to Mark, well, actually, I'm not going to lie. It don't mean nothing to me. It's been taken out of my consciousness. Okay. It's still in there subconsciously, but I've got to read and not understand loads of stuff. So why the fuck aren't we using gods like Aragorn, Samwise Gamgee, Bilbo? Why aren't we using those gods that are now in our consciousness and have been complete, you know, because of the films? Because obviously I read the books and my family's always been into it, but then the films injected a whole new energy for millions and millions of people, loads of energy going into these archetypes. So why the hell aren't we using them as our... I've got like a bronze Shiva, and I've got like a bronze this, that, and the other one. I wanted a pan, and I realised, why do I want that? I don't know fucking anything about pan, other than something, you know, other than something that doesn't really mean anything, other than it's just a story. But when I watched Lord of the Rings, I spent 3 whole days bawling my eyes out, and I can relate to the characters in there. So why aren't we using those as our archetypes? Because especially now, they've been given a new lease of life with the films. They're so charged. They're so charged. And yeah, that talks about the consciousness and how the mass consciousness, the Twinkly Skywater, has charged those archetypes, I think. That's just my opinion anyway. So I'm thinking about maybe just having Aragorn, Samwise as my gods.
Why not? I mean, Tolkien would have understood that, you see, because Tolkien was, I know he was sort of like a high Catholic, but he was also a pagan.
Exactly, yeah.
Pagan. I mean, he was so much, he was in touch with very deep spiritual traditions. I mean, the books are, the story, the books, and indeed the films by Peter Jackson, which, so I'm so glad they were made, because you couldn't make a film like that nowadays. It's I mean, I haven't even watched the new adaptations of the new Lord of the Rings things. It's
No.
And Mary
not.
Too, yeah,
absolutely not. See, because I'm starting to see them as my new gods. That is blasphemous. What they're doing. That's blasphemous. What they're doing to those archetypes.
Just watching the trailer was enough. I boycotted the whole thing. Mary mentioned C.S. Lewis is another one. I've just been reading the Space Trilogy, actually, which is I've not actually read for ages, and I've read the Space Trilogy, and it's like that's really good. That is, it's for adults though. It's not, especially the last one, The Hideous Strength. Actually, it's not suitable for children, but
is that C.S. Lewis? Did he?
Yeah, it's.
Oh right, I've not read it. Yeah.
It's his science fiction trilogy he did. Yeah, it's, and of course, like there's the Lord of the Rings. I think is like I watched that when I was ill, when I was off sick from work. I watched Lord of the Rings over and over again. It's healing. I think it's something healing.
It is. It really is. I'm going to start. It's Sam for me. It's Sam good. And Aragorn for me. Frodo wouldn't have even got. I mean, he was just about to give. You know, when they first came across the Black Rider and they hid under the tree, he always fucking gave the ring away then. If it weren't for Sam, he wouldn't even got out the fucking Shire. Yeah. So it's Aragorn and Sam for me the whole fucking
I mean,
way.
the thing of the Shire is the big thing for you, isn't it? You say that
the Shire,
first opening of the first film.
I watched that on the loop over and over and over and over and over again.
Because the Shire is what life used to be like, that they've taken us away from.
And oh my God, when you look at where the elves live and things like that, I said to Mark, we could all live like that. We could all. They talk about sustainability, but it doesn't have to be fucking ugly. It can be beautiful, like where the elves live. We could all live sustainably, like they do there, beautifully, with carvings and, you know, it doesn't have to be concrete squares that literally take the soul out of you. So you think, Well, it's called the broken window effect, isn't it? If it looks like shit, you'll carry on treating it like shit. But if it's a beautiful thing like it is in Rivendell, you'll treat it in a beautiful way, and then you'll feel beautiful inside.
Exactly. I mean, this is, and Marie's reading Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which is great. It's Voyage of the Dawn Treader is kind of an inversion of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. It's like a voyage, not a river on a river. It's up a sea, but it's like an inversion of that. It's like a positive version of that. It's great. It's great. But on the subject of Rivendell, I mean, it's all to do with Tolkien's upbringing, because he grew up in King's Norton, which was a beautiful village. But it's right on the outskirts of what at the time was the fastest growing city in the world, Birmingham. Birmingham, no offense to any Brummies watching, but it's not renowned for its architectural splendor. Its environmental delights. And as he grew up, he watched his village be swallowed up by the very concrete boxes you mentioned, Liz. He watched these concrete boxes replace this lovely village that he lived in, and you know what? This is why he depicts the Hobbit world as kind of like his perfect world.
Yeah,
the Hobbit world is his paradise, the Shire.
But
Even the
it's
name
literally what it used to be like where I live right now. That's why they chose those accents to play the Hobbits. It's me. You know what I mean?
West Country. There was in Jackson's film, of course, the Hobbits all have West Country accents, and the Orcs are all Londoners. They're sort of Londoners.
I know they all sound like him.
Yeah, they're sort of like
it's very discriminatory.
Or Essex, Essex, Kentish sort of home country accents. Yeah, but but the Hobbit's world is amazing, because the Hobbits are like their course are the kind of the heroes of the whole thing, because the ring comes into the possession of Bilbo, which is not what the ring intends. And when it's in the possession of the Hobbit, that's the beginning of the doom of the ring. That's the beginning of the end of the ring story, because once it's in the possession of the Hobbits, he doesn't have a chance. Not because the Hobbits are these diminutive humanoids. They're not great warriors. They have no magical powers. All they're interested in is pipeweed and food and beer, and
it's me and Mark,
fresh built earth and all these other things. And
it's me and Mark,
if you watch in the extended versions, Liz,
you watch
those if you get the extended version, because what's left out of the theatrical cut is where he in the beginning where he describes the Shire in detail. You have Bilbo writing about the Shire, there are no churches in Hobbit world. They have no priests. They have no religion.
Exactly.
It's almost
like the Abrahamic sand demons haven't come over yet, have they?
It's almost as if the spirituality of the Hobbits is sort of like inherent
paganism, Ben.
They don't need of church, because it's any more. They can't explain what it'd be like to have a religion any more than the fish can explain the water it swims in.
Exactly.
But they've got a clear good and evil. It's a battle between good and evil.
It's very anti-nihilistic. Yes. It's very different. Game of Thrones is very different, even though the setting is similar. Game of Thrones is Game of Thrones is really just about there's no real good or overarching good or bad within Game of Thrones. They are I've never seen it either. I know a little about the story. There are positive and negative.
It's natural law in a way.
Game of Thrones they're just sort of like these different groups of people in different houses. They're just fighting for their own self-interest. There's no very different from Tolkien, which has a distinct moral narrative that is overarching in the entire story.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked before about how modern sort of literature, films, all these things, it's become, darkness has become the good guys. Even you get like the anti-heroes, that were evil, but there's a little bit of good in them, and they're a little bit reformed, but they've still done terrible things, or just outright, with the Joker, the bad guy is outright the hero of the film, and it's part of this, I think, for want of a better word, a satanic agenda, but this idea that evil is cool, and evil is, strongest, and it's, why
to be designed.
Yeah. And even though they still couch it in terms, of the good guy winning, it's always, there's some sympathy for the bad guy, or, It's a confusion of
in
what's
Tribe days, the bad guys would be kicked out the fucking tribe and ostracised and not allowed anywhere. You got a child molester in a tribe. Get the fuck out, all killed. Honest to Christ, they wouldn't put up with it. But it reminds me, my favourite bit in when we're talking about the Hobbits, my favourite bit in 1984 is when he's looking at what's his name? Winston's looking out the window when he's at his girlfriend's house or whatever it is, and he sees this fat old woman putting out her clothes, and he's like, "It's the proles that are saving us."
Yeah, and she's
not the academics.
You notice the proles are sort of more or less left alone. They're very underestimated because they're allowed to sing songs and recite nursery rhymes. They're allowed, like the old lady, like the lady putting out the washing.
And she's allowed to be fat, Ben. She's allowed to be. She's allowed to let herself fucking thank Christ for that.
Do you notice they're allowed to use imperial measurements, which is very interesting as well. They have pints of beer in the pub and things like that, and
it comes in pints.
Yeah, but it's odd, isn't it? Like it's an odd sort of thing that it's where you get the hope from. It's like
exactly.
It's the little things, like what gives Sam and Frodo hope during the last bitter journey towards Mount Doom is seeing the stars in the sky and realizing they're the same stars they see from the Shire, even though they're in a land of Mordor, which is this horrible volcanic wasteland. And it's like, but it's true. I mean, the ring was doomed the moment Bilbo picked it up, not because the hobbits, as I said, the hobbits these really kind of sweet creatures, but as Elrond said, they show remarkable resistance to its evil. He says, he came with the ring. He came this far with the ring. He showed remarkable resistance to the ring.
Don't you think we're the same for the old jibber jabber? Haven't we shown remarkable resilience to that? Haven't we?
If you remember, because Saruman, Saruman is kind of an idealistic who sort of lost his hope. He was originally an idealist, but he became cynical and bitter. He became basically a backslapper, to use my terminology. Saruman turned into a backslapper, which is why he says he talks about that. He uses the word halfling, which is a derogatory word for a hobbit. But then it's interesting how Gandalf replies to him is very, very interesting. I use this quote a lot in my talks. He said, "Don't you think only great power can defeat evil?" That's not what I found. It's the simple acts of kindness and love that keep the darkness at bay.
And it's
he's referring to the hobbits. He's referring directly to the hobbits. That's their strength, you see. It's their sweetness is their strength.
And an amazing bit in that film when he's saying that is all of a sudden, because they're lost in the mines, and all of a sudden he's like, "Hold on, that smells better over there. I'm going that way." Something was sweeter, something smelt nicer, and that was the way out of the fucking darkness.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's all. I know it's very new agey, but the Celestine prophecy, and it was like take the road most beautiful, or that sort of thing. Just something positive, whether it's a smell or the look of something. But again, I suppose that's the opposite of where they're, like we said before, promoting ugliness.
Exactly, and that goes straight back to the square boxes we live in. Hobbits' holes around. The Rivendell is carved out of the trees they live in, but they haven't destroyed the fucking trees. It's just carved into the trees.
There are no straight lines, are there? There are no straight lines.
It's fucking beautiful.
World. And there are none in Rivendell in the elf world. It is. It's and you see that in the difference. For example, this is what one of the in the Boudica novels by Amanda Scott. This is one of the characters, one of the British characters, actually says, the thing about Romans is they love straight lines.
Yeah.
Their houses are square.
Yeah.
Whereas ours are round and things like that. It's a really extraordinary thing. Of course, as you know, I consider that the beginning of Illuminati rule in this country with the Roman conquest. And it's this comes up in C.S. Lewis. I don't know if Marie, she's reading the Narnia, the Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know if she's ever read the Space Trilogy, but one of the things that in the I would say the most important, the last one in particular, you could read that on its own. Actually, you don't need to read the first two are good. Perilandra, and they're called Out of the Silent Planet and Perilandra, but the Perilander especially is really good, but really you could read that Hideous Strength on its own as a standalone novel, because there's very little connection to the first two, actually. A couple of characters, that's all really. But they have this nice corporation, which is essentially I won't give any spoilers because Marie's going to read it, but there's a free audio book on YouTube at the moment, by the way. The nice corporation is one of the things it does. It's destroying all the old architecture. I mean, Tolkien would appreciate this as well, and Tolkien knew Lewis. I mean, they were friends when
Yeah.
It's almost like it could, they both influenced each other actually, because they were both writing a great story.
Well, they did, because Tolkien put away Lord of the Rings for years and years and years, and it was C.S. Lewis that encouraged him to keep going with it.
And he's described as the midwife of the whole thing. And Tolkien writes the foreword actually to that Hideous Strength. They destroy lots of old buildings. I mean, it begins with a nice corporation taking over this college in like an equivalent of Oxford. It's got a different name, but it's the equivalent of Oxford, and it's like tearing up all these old trees and this ancient oak woodland, which is owned by the university, to create some laboratory where they're actually doing some monstrous kind of satanic kind of alchemical experiments. It's horrible.
I think I did actually read a news story not long ago. There was something, and I think it was something like Oxford University, and they were literally cutting down some trees to build some new.
Oh, that was in Bond Square. That was horrible. That,
so it was actually happening.
That's green, isn't it? That's fucking green, isn't it?
I mean, they done it. I mean, there are many scenes actually of destruction of trees. It's actually an overriding theme of Lord of the Rings. There's many scenes in the books that are not reproduced in the film of the destruction of trees.
Yeah.
Which is why I think Jackson included the destruction of the parkland outside the Tower of Orthanc, which is not actually in the books. It's not described in detail in the books, but Pete Jackson put it in there because he often did this. If he couldn't include one part of the story, he'd sort of like weave it into somewhere else. But it was really this is kind of like a symbolic of the decency and virtue versus barbarism. And it's been
giving me hope, because obviously this illness has been getting me down a little bit, not going to lie. But I needed, and I now Keith Starling has got in. I can't even bear to look at the fucking news, because it's like having Blair in again. And all their warmongering fucking arseholes. And I can't even look at the news. And I just feel as if we're going into the third part of the Lord of the Rings now. I really feel like we're going into the third one, but don't forget, the third one is where the biggest battle is, but it's also the return of the fucking king.
Exactly.
And we're going into that, and we need to be remembering who our kings are. And mine at the moment is Aragorn and Samwise.
Exactly. The term king doesn't mean you have to be
oh Christ, no! Bloody hell! You know what I'm like then.
Yeah, I know. The king is symbolic, actually, of the king.
I call Richard D. Hall one of our kings. Do you know what I mean? He's standing fucking firm.
It's true. And Marie says Jackson was a huge outsider in New Zealand film. Yeah, his first successful movie was completely independent. It was called Bad Taste. It was kind of a horror comedy. It's so low budget, but it's so funny. He made it when he's basically.
I've never seen it, and my friends really like it, but yeah,
it's hilarious.
I would say, if you're feeling despondent and down in the dumps like I was when Keith Starling got in, then please watch Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I've been bawling my eyes out for 2 weeks watching it. I've been meditating and putting all my intention and power into the strength of Aragorn and the naivety and the sort of naive wisdom of Sam. He doesn't realize that he's basically the main character in the story. Everybody thinks it's Frodo. It's not Frodo. He wouldn't have even got out the Shire. It's Sam. Okay, he doesn't know that though, Ben. And that's why he's so fucking powerful.
It's what's weird. The thing about Lord of the Rings is the characters are motivated primarily by love of each other, a friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what drives them forwards. When they're doing these things, they're always thinking, well, we've got to do this for them. And they have their mission to destroy the ring, which, of course, is the overarching arch of the entire story. But behind that all is caring for their own friends, their own. This is their strength. This is what the Dark Lord doesn't have.
And when they run into battle, they say, for Frodo, for Sam, for my old gaffer. Do you know what I mean? It's not selfish acts. It's not selfish.
When the ring is finally, when the ring, it's really weird because it's not. Some might interpret it as anticlimactic. I don't, because I understand it. When the ring is finally destroyed, it almost happens by accident, and of course, that's when the ambiguous force of Gollum then comes into the scene. And that's how it's actually a very dramatic scene, the final destruction of the ring.
Yeah.
It's not done by Frodo. Frodo doesn't go up and just throw the ring in.
No.
At the very last moment, he finally succumbs to the power of the ring.
But it's so interesting, isn't it? Because
literally the last few seconds, the ring takes over.
Sam would have done, though, Ben. Yeah. That's what I don't understand. You know, I don't understand why at the beginning they just say, "Oh, just fucking have it, Sam. You're obviously stronger than Frodo. He's just prettier than you. Just fucking go and have the potatoes and chuck it in there, and we'll all be back for tea."
Yeah, Sam is cool because Sam is like
Sam is he's
this peasant guy. I mean,
he's underrated.
Yeah, I mean, Frodo's kind of aristocratic, and Sam's a peasant.
Exactly.
But you know, in the Hobbit world, there were no. I don't think there are any real class differences in the Hobbit world. Like we
no, because in the book it says they all respect each other, and what does it say? Bilbo Gaffer's like, Bilbo learnt him his words. I don't think he meant no harm by it. He learnt him his words.
Mm.
But he's a bit of an outsider when Bilbo. He's not frowned upon because he went on adventures and stuff.
Yeah. Hobbits aren't supposed to go on adventures. That's right. But that's why at the beginning of the Hobbit, he has this dilemma, and eventually he chooses to follow the others and go on this adventure. But he doesn't lose his hobbitness. I mean, none of them do. They don't lose their hobbitness. I mean, it's just. But there's a huge depth behind their simplicity, as Gandalf says. You can learn all about their ways in a single week, but after 500 years, they can still surprise you.
I tell you what, I loved it when Faramir says to her, when Faramir meets him, and he's like, "Who the fuck are you?" And what do you mean, you know? And he says to Sam, he says, "Oh, what?" Because Sam's sticking up for Frodo, and he's like, "Who are you? His security guard or whatever?" He says. He said, "No, I'm his gardener. I'm his gardener."
Yeah. You know, Cosmic, you can identify with that.
Oh,
you said I need to watch the films again.
The gardener is
Sam can be your hero.
Nick.
I've done these.
Please go and watch it again.
I played that role myself. I mean, I'm sort of like I'd say I'm a kind of rough working class person according to the class structure of my society. I'm in a kind of rough working class, but I've always done my job properly. When I was a hospital porter, I was always a Sam. I was always a Sam-like character, and I am now.
Do you know? He says pride and dignity in it.
Yeah, yeah.
He says pride and dignity.
That's right. In the film, it's Elrond who says pride and dignity, but it's Sam who actually, in the book,
what was it?
Sam
I said the other
line.
Oh, there was something in there, and we were quoting you. We were saying, wouldn't it be funny if one of them? I can't remember what it was. What was it? One of them said something, and. I think
it might have been Sam, but you know.
Oh, I can't remember. We said, wouldn't it be funny now if they just said pride and dignity? Is it? Fuck it, I don't know what I'm talking about. but it would be funny. We thought of you, Ben, anyway. It would be funny if whatever that person has said had then followed it up with pride and dignity. Stop the new world order. Anyway, it was funny when we said it.
Oh, I just love it. I love it so much. You're right. I mean, it is a healing film. I mean, it's funny you're watching it while you're in a healing. You're going through a healing process. I used to watch it. I watched it when I had. In fact, there's a video of me doing it. It's a very poor quality.
I remember.
It's when I had swine flu. I was watching.
Yeah, I remember.
I went round to my brother's house and I just watched Lord of the Rings. I binge watched Lord. You could see me. I filmed myself watching it. Because I kept a swine flu diary when I had it because
it's got hope. It's just all about hope. And you know, one of the most, you know, the loveliest things is he takes his little box of salt and is like, they fall off the bloody cliff because they're trying to catch it. And he said, "What the bloody hell's in here?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a bit of salt." And he's like, "It's very special salt." He's like, "Yeah, because it's a bit of home.
It's part of the Shire, yeah. It's something
just a bit of salt, yeah.
It's yeah. That's right. He it's incredible. It's incredible. It's a pinnacle of human creativity. It really is, and I love it.
We need to be literally, in my opinion, we need to be getting those archetypes because they're already fueled. You know, everybody before those films, not everybody had heard of that book. I had, because I'm a bit of a nerd, but not everybody had heard of Lord of the Rings. Everybody knows Bilbo. Everybody knows, it's on every single meme on Facebook you've ever been on. Everybody knows Aragorn. Everybody knows Samwise. These are our archetypes. For me personally, I'm going to drop I should be following Freya, but hold on a minute, I've got to look at what that means. I should be following Bridget. Wait a minute, who? I don't know what that means. I know what Galadriel symbolises. I know what Aragorn symbolises. I know what Samwise symbolises. And it is fucking charged in this 21st century with our collective consciousness. So I'm having them as my gods.
And the thing is, mythologies evolve. And
exactly.
As you were saying, Ben, about Tolkien, but yeah, he was a scholar of Norse mythology, and so much of that went into it.
Exactly.
So it's an evolution, what I'm trying to say, of centuries old 100%. Mythologies, and so it's a reworking of these archetypes.
So I'm going to stop beating myself up because I don't understand my pagan roots and I don't understand the Norse ones, but I do understand my new ones. Like I understand it with my heart so much that that's what I'm doing.
That's the way. It's
an excuse to get a poster of Aragorn.
So much.
But, I mean, it's true. I mean, like Dream Team was put. We're all warriors against the darkness, which I think is
that's true. Every character has is identifiable. I mean, like Sam represents, of course, the unbroken and stellar friendship and love. But then there's other characters who are more. Like, for example, Aragorn is a more mixed character. Certainly in the beginning, of course, he's fleeing because his own self-doubt has caused him to run away and become this ranger, as they call them, under a fake identity. But then he comes back. He goes back, and eventually through his loyalty to his friends and through his desire to do good, he eventually comes back and he retakes the throne. And of course, Saruman is the Saruman was not originally an evil person. He became evil through cynicism and pessimism, and this is why I think the backslappers are on the wrong track, because they have sense of fallen into a trap of this cynical attitude, which has led them almost to see themselves as better than everyone else because they have this cynical attitude. So they are superior to others who don't have it. Whereas some of them deep down really maybe regret that they lost out hope. That the backslappers are devoid of. They're like us. They have our beliefs, but they're devoid of hope.
Do you remember the bit when Gandalf comes back and he said, and Legolas says, "Oh my God, sorry, I thought you were Saruman." He said, "I am Saruman, or rather, I am Saruman. What Saruman should be."
Because Saruman is a white wizard.
Yeah.
Gandalf becomes a white wizard after he dies. Yeah, it's Saruman the White, of course. Then, because he believes, well, he believes he's very similar to Peter Hitchens. Actually, I was comparing him to Peter Hitchens because he believes that against the forces of evil there can be no victory. You can only move forward by cooperating with the forces of evil.
Oh,
and I mean, in his own way, poor old Boromir feels a similar way. Although he's far more emotional and for him it's far more personal because he's a Gondorian, because he's right on the border of Mordor. So for him it's far more personal. But he feels the same way. He feels, we must use we must use evil, the evil weapon against the evil one. And Gandalf says, you can't do that. It doesn't work. You can't.
Well, Grima figured that out at the end. Grima Wormtongue, because when he actually sees the army. And I think he just didn't realise. He didn't realise. He's like, oh, I'm just going to be on his side because I might get the girl. And then when he sees the fucking armies, you see a little tear come out. So then he's like, realises, shit, I've gone a bit too far now. Yeah. So he's still got his humanity.
I can't remember if it's in the book, but it's in the film. Grima, I mean, it's only in the extended version. I mean, Saruman's completely cut out of the Return of the King in the feature cut, but in the extended version, Grima kills Saruman.
Oh yeah, no, he does in the extended he does, yeah.
Because like that scene, bloody, Christopher Lee was so pissed off that he'd been.
He was,
out of the
yeah.
movie. He refused
Yeah.
to attend the ceremony and stuff like that. The guy's he started in 140 films, for goodness sake. He knows how the
I
system
know.
works. Why is he
But I
have to
think
work-
they actually videoed loads of him, didn't they? They actually made tons and tons of film with him in.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben's disappeared. We've got.
It's back.
Good
Oh, he's back.
Oh, it's my.
Oh,
I'm
he's
doing
gone.
it back.
I even forget the name. What's the name of that bloody alien? It's not Colin. Roger. What's his name?
Russell.
Yeah, I can never remember his
Yeah,
name.
Russell. His
I never
name's
remember his
Russell.
name.
It's from
I
a
had one of them,
song.
but I've lost it.
It's from a song by the Black Goo, which is this.
Yeah,
band,
no, we
and,
know. We
you
know.
the grey. There's
Yeah.
a grey called Russell.
Yeah.
Thank you, Johnny. All hail the Frowns of the Shire. So I feel honoured that we're spoken of in such terms.
Yeah.
Very kind.
Anyone who says they're against this New World Order, they've got to read Lord of the Rings. They've got to.
100%.
It is.
It reinvigorated me, Ben.
It's 101. Course 101 of this path to freedom is to read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it reinvigorated me, especially with Keith Starling.
That's it, Margaret. All the main characters are on individual heroes' journey.
Yeah, exactly.
Whilst also aiding on the tribal journeys.
It's really true. That's
like
a really
all of us
good,
in these
good
times.
point.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Tolkien knew that.
All for one and one for all.
Oh Christ.
Yeah.
But yeah, same principle, I suppose. Individual.
Both, Nick.
Yeah.
Cosmic.
I'd say
Read both.
do the film first, because the book it takes a lot. He describes things like you're going to be sick to death of what a fucking leaf looks like. And what's the name of that one I really like? The one that represents the kind of green man.
Oh, that's interesting though. Tom Bombadil.
He's not in the film.
Yeah, no, he's an interesting character because I would say
I think he's great.
I would say I don't know, but
He's like a god character.
he seems more like a sort of British sort of green man.
Yeah.
That as opposed to sort of a Norse mythology. I don't know.
No, he does 100%. But my kids who read it, they've read the books a million different times. They get stuck on the Tom Bombadil stuff in the book, whereas it's one of my favourite bits. I absolutely adore it. So I do the films, Nick, if I was you, the extended version of the films.
Liz doesn't know why she married me because I had this thing when the films came out. I've not read. I don't know why I never read the books. I read The Hobbit when I was at school, and I was into science fiction and fantasy. For some reason, never read Lord of the Rings. And then when the films came out, it was like, I need to read the books before watching the films because generally that's what I try to do. And then never got around to it.
I don't know why I married him. If I'd have known that when I married him, I would have married him.
I've only watched the films since being with Liz, and then read the books afterwards.
Unbloody believable.
Just decades too late.
I read the books when I was a kid, but I mean, I read them again.
Well, all decent people did, Ben.
The Tom Bombadil, because like Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, I like these. They are. I mean, it was almost like an interlude in the story. I mean, in fact, Jackson cut them out. But if you may have noticed later on in the series later on in the films with Treebeard, there's a scene where the hobbits are trapped underneath Treebeard Fangorn, and then of course Treebeard turns up reciting some of Tom Bombadil's dialogue.
Because it's Tom that does it in the actual book. He's the one that says, "Go back to sleep."
In the book, that happens earlier in the story because the hobbits they get trapped under the tree. Bombadil comes along.
Go back to sleep.
But it's funny because in the book, this is the moment when Frodo first puts the ring on. I mean, this is straight. I mean, it's because he's under the care of Tom Bombadil that he doesn't experience like the or in the Dark Riders and things like that as he does in other parts of the story. But he does put the ring on when he's with Tom Bombadil and Goldberry and vanishes and Tom and Goldberry understand exactly what it is
because Tom puts it on as well and nothing happens to him.
They understand it. They understand it in the way that they are obviously magical people and they're ambiguous.
I really like it.
Yeah,
I like it. I like that scene. I don't know why it was cut out.
I can see in terms of moving the action along. Excuse me. With the film, it's much more that it's quicker. It's the hobbits all, racing to get out the Shire and pursued by the Dark Riders, and I can see from a cinematic point of view why he didn't go into it. But you know, but I don't know.
It's very important.
But but on another hand, it is an important scene, so it's got important elements to it, which like, you know, to do, I would say, with this sort of British type paganism that maybe it. I don't know, but he is an interesting character, and he is somehow a little bit outside of the rest of the story. So I can understand why it's left out of the film. But
I do, yeah. I also understand why, of course, they couldn't put the final scene of the Scourging of the Shire. I mean, this was the epilogue after the Aragorn is crowned king. Well, they returned, of course, Saruman decides to wreak revenge on the Hobbit. So this is proof that Saruman has just become pure evil. This is what a lot of the backslappers do, and this is why backslappers are quite likely to become skeptics, I find. Not there's something evil about skeptics, but I think backslappers are quite easily maybe be recruited to MI5 or MI6 quite easily in that sense. But Saruman returned when all the pretense that Saruman is trying to do good by cooperating with evil just goes out the window, because he becomes a monster of revenge once Sauron is killed. I mean, he could just go back to everyone and apologize if why doesn't he just go and say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong"? But of course, then because he comes back, and of course, Saruman's end is very different. I mean, it's of course, Grima doesn't kill him in the book. He goes back to the. I can't remember exactly what happens to Saruman. I know that that the hobbits use the magic powder from Galadriel. I think it's from Galadriel to regrow the trees that he destroys. And then he says at one point that he can't bear it that Frodo forgave him. He finds it impossible. He said he couldn't bear it that Frodo didn't hate him and forgave him at one point. I remember that bit. And that's just before the end when they go down to the harbour. And that's in the film where they leave at the end.
You can kind of understand that, can't you? Because if somebody forgives you, then you've got a kind of... If somebody forgives you, it kind of puts what you've done into super high definition 3D, doesn't it? Because if you've still got an enemy that hates you, you still feel justified in hating them back, and it's like a game of hate tennis. But if somebody puts a ball down and stops throwing the hate at you, all of a sudden you're just left with this sort of like, I'm an arsehole kind of.
Yeah, I think Saruman was in that position. He realised what an arsehole he'd been. He didn't have. He didn't have the safety net or the protection of natural psychopathy. He was a pragmatist. He really was. He became evil by what he believed was simple practicalities. He was a managerial individual.
Yeah, no, 100%. He sort of like tried to talk. Oh, Gollum! Bloody hell! We've not even mentioned Gollum. Bloody hell!
Yeah.
Like, oh my god!
Yeah.
When he's having his conversation with himself, and you see the two aspects of it.
The schizophrenic ex-hobbit. Yes.
Oh my! I know. Yeah. Christ, how could we forget Gollum? Bloody
Marie says utilitarian evil. That's right. Yeah. A lot of people do evil just by thinking that these are the rules you have to follow. And even though you think if I do this, eventually something good will come out of it. This is what Saruman thinks. This is why Saruman ends up collaborating with Sauron. He believes there is no way, we can't beat them. We have to join them. And maybe that way at the end, something good will come out of it. Of course, he's completely wrong. And he's his sort of backslapper attitude has led him, and which I think backslappers are essentially people who've lost hope. They're very cynical and pessimistic people, essentially.
I tell you what, just thinking about Gollum, and we were saying, the hobbits, and it wouldn't have had any effect on them. Well, Smeagol, from the minute he fucking saw it, it kind of took over him, didn't it? So it's kind of showing a crack even in the makeup of a hobbit. There was that vulnerability, even in this perfect-ish kind of race. There was.
But Smeagol was from a different. I mean, I think did he call them river hobbits? I can't remember what he called them. They're a different kind of hobbit. What was it?
They're still hobbits, Ben.
Yeah, but of course, when he sees the ring, it immediately consumes him and possesses him, and he kills the other hobbit to get it.
And then he literally, it's like MK Ultra, he disassociates, he becomes two people. It's literally like that, isn't it? He murders somebody, and then he's got this like, oh, I'm two people now. You know, like they do with bloody mind control, MK Ultra. He disassociates and has a conversation with himself. You know, he's calling you a murderer, but then he's trying to stick up for his actions, and he's trying to say, no, but, you know, you wouldn't have survived without me, the bad one says. And then the good one says, oh, yeah, but I've got Master now. And so he kind of literally is having two conversations with it because he's disassociated from the evil.
Only Sam can understand it. Sam sees through him. He calls him Stinker, it's Stinker and Slinker. He doesn't call him Gollum, he calls him Stinker and Slinker.
Yeah.
Because he realizes there's two people, there's two beings inside him in this schizophrenic kind of world, that his personality is split. And he's the one who tries to save Frodo. Frodo, unfortunately, falls under the spell of Gollum. And
the bit at the end when he's like, but you promised on the ring. No, Smeagol promised. And he's like, Smeagol lied. It's just, oh my God. And Sam was vindicated then. Sam was completely vindicated.
Poor old Sam,
My precious.
And he knows he has to drive Frodo away from Sam, so he makes Frodo look like
I hate that bit.
Sam is like stealing all the Lembas.
When he points out the crumbs, I nearly had to fast forward that. It winds me up so much. Oh my God. I'll tell you what I love. I love it when the hobbits are dressed up as the orcs. I absolutely, they look so cool in their little orc outfits. I love that bit. They're just going off on one.
It really is, I think, one of the greatest films ever made.
It's the best films.
It really is.
Non-stop for 2 weeks.
Films of it. Yeah, I don't blame you. When I was
on a fucking loop. It's the only thing that's getting me past Keir Starmer, fucking football, and bloody Trump. Sorry, Ben. I'm a backslapper when it comes to that. You're probably going to smack me in the face, but I'm a backslapper when it comes to all that. But you know that. You've known me long enough.
I know.
We've not fallen out over it yet, have we, mate?
I don't fall out with
I mean, I agree. It's important to have hope, Ben. I mean, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about it.
And we have got hope, or we wouldn't be still doing this, would we?
Yeah. Exactly.
You know?
So, I couldn't live without that. I could never be a backslapper because I'd be dead. Honestly, I couldn't live with it.
If anybody goes near my fucking back and slaps me,
Yes.
I've had a bloody operation. I don't know if you know.
Have you had an operation?
I don't know if I've told anybody.
I wasn't aware of it.
I've got a big
The boys
bandage.
treated you well. That's the main thing. If they treat
It was a miserable git. I'm not going to lie.
dear.
The one that took me out of theatre and back again. But Ben, I say he was a miserable git. I don't know what he was because he couldn't speak English.
Oh,
So he might not have been a miserable git. You might have just been, I don't know what the fuck she's banging on about. She's on morphine. She's chatting shit. Maybe he was just rude, or maybe just like, what is she going on about? I don't fucking know. Anyway, What the fuck's that got to do with? What's that got to do with David Bohm?
We've had a journey, our own journey on this.
Yes, we've certainly been.
But it's good. It's good.
I'm glad I chose to come and join you because, like, I wasn't going to do a talk. Like I say, you're seeing me as I am normally when I'm not doing talks. You know, my head's exposed. I've been drinking.
Yeah.
I've finished my wine. Well, I've got another bottle of red, but
You've done fantastically well, Ben, and as always.
Because we were going to have Ben on the 8th for another chat, but then they kicked me out.
Yeah, we were banned.
Fucking banned me. So we need to pencil you in again, don't we, Ben?
Yeah, I'll come and do another talk for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you're welcome, Marie. I could do my Is There Any Hope talk, actually, because
I like that one. No, I like that one.
I'll do my Is There Any Hope talk. I think
that was the one we saw. We saw that one live at Probe. What's it called?
Yes.
Probe. Yeah, I did it at Probe, actually.
That's where we seen it live.
I miss Probe. Was so wonderful. I miss it so much.
That's not coming back, is it?
No, it's got finished. But there is an event at the YMCA. It's Earth Mission.
Neil McDonald. He's the one that does work with Thomas Sheridan. It's the Mysterious Earth
Conference. Yeah, I'm going to that.
Mysterious Earth Conference. Well, I can't. We're supposed to be. Mark's definitely going to Glastonbury Symposium on the weekend. I'm probably not because I've still got to have you back then. But we've already fucking paid for my ticket. So if Connor doesn't go, Connor might go, but if he doesn't, we've got a fucking ticket going for cheap.
Hey, well, I'm sure someone will pick that one up, but
yeah, because it's about.
well, not me, unfortunately, but
it's very expensive, that ticket for the whole thing. So
we
I
can
had a great
negotiate.
time
We can
last year.
negotiate.
I had a really good time last year. I really loved it. I really did.
Mm.
I'd love
Yeah,
to
it's
go
great.
this time, but I spent my
Yeah,
money
it's
on
good.
Contact in the Desert, and
Yeah. Are
it's-
you going to America every year now, Ben?
probably not, but I do want to go to Roswell. I've got to go to Roswell at some point. I mean, I've been to,
You went to Rachel, didn't you?
I did get to go to Area 51. I mean, on the skin of my teeth, I managed to get there. But
I know, we all cheered when you got on that bloody bus. Christ
yeah, it was
alive.
great when I got the coach pulled away. I didn't wait. I waited until the coach actually pulled away and was driving.
I'm
out.
not being funny. The coach driver didn't want to drive more than 10 miles an hour.
Oh, he was bloody useless.
And then went in the wrong direction.
I
Got
didn't
lost.
like driving in the dark.
Both coaches got lost, and we were like using Google Earth to like guide the guy. I mean,
You were telling the
he's
driver where to go, and he was going 12 miles an hour because he didn't like driving fast in the dark.
Mm.
He's a fucking coach driver.
Oh,
You've got one
they won't
job.
use that coach for him again. They won't use that one again.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
Bloody useless, absolutely useless bastards they were.
Yeah, it's a shame you couldn't get there in the daytime, isn't it, really?
Oh well, yeah.
So maybe next time, Ben, another trip. And,
I'll go back there. Yeah, go back there.
Combine that with
it was
Roswell.
fun. It was nice to just to get there. Yeah, but I'd like to go to Roswell. But if I'm going to go to Roswell, I have to go with somebody. You need someone who can drive on American roads, and which is very, very different to driving on British roads. And because Roswell itself is like, it's interesting. There's a few things, but the really interesting stuff is like the crash sites.
Yeah.
So I want to go with someone who could like take me. I don't have a driving license. I can't do it.
You know quite a few American people, though. You knew quite a few of them people.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to organise. But because of funding and everything, because of like wanting to save some money, I decided to give Glastonbury Symposium a miss this year. But maybe next year I'll go. Oh, green tea. Oh, thank you, green tea. Yeah, you should come with me. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, Mary, Dad just drove Route 66. Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Oh, thanks, green tea. Come along, green tea. Yeah, please do. That'd be cool.
The Reno Air Races are moved to Roswell. I'll be your driver, Ben. Johnny's saying.
Oh, thank you very much. Reno Air Race. Oh, wicked. Those Reno Air Races are good, actually. It's like really, really cool. With the planes go round in circles and that. It's freaking brilliant, man. Brilliant. Yeah,
we just had that round here, actually. Oh my God, the bloody army's on manoeuvres. We were coming back from Chippenham today. I mean, I've never seen vehicles that look like that before, and I've lived here all my life. Usually it's just normal looking, weird looking army, really weird looking army vehicles that I've never seen before. Must have been about 30 of them, all driving along the fucking road.
UFO crash. Must have been one in the area.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
Must have been. Couldn't be anything else. Couldn't be anything else.
Well, that was our first thought. If it's happening in Chippenham, it's a fucking spaceship.
I'm really glad I chose to
thanks, Ben. We appreciate it.
I can't talk tonight. I can't. But once I got online on the
get on there. You're
that was fine.
Yeah, and we went down. We went on a little route down the Shire, didn't we? We
did. We went from David Bohm to the works of J.R. Tolkien. Yes.
And nothing wrong with that.
I love that.
What you do? Oh no, you won't do anything. There won't be one next week because I can't be bothered. As you've probably noticed, Mark's in Glastonbury.
I can't be bothered, she says. Then she makes a sudden emergence, and an hour and a half later, talking about Lord of the Rings. So
no, I can't be bothered to do one next week by myself.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. I'll go and buy my stuff on Etsy. For Christ's sake, I don't work anymore. I'm fucking skint.
Mark and I have both been on really interesting journeys this year. We've both spread our rings. Yeah, but
I've been down bloody box surgery.
I hope you'll be better soon.
Oh,
you can join us,
Yeah. Right, guys, we're going to call it a night, I think. Thank you for listening, and I really enjoyed that, Ben. And we'll get together and book a book one when you do a talk. And if anybody else wants to do a talk, somebody said they were going to. Gary might be doing one.
Yeah.
Nick Hayes might be doing one for us as well.
Yeah.
Nick, cool, Nick. Just let us know.
I will. Obviously, I'll share this one on Hapanmo Voice as well because I've been a part of this video. So
awesome.
Cool.
Take care, guys.
All right, guys. Thanks, Ben. Take care.
Yeah, love you
all. And we'll say goodbye to everybody as well.
Speak soon. See those that Glastonbury Symposium that are going. Love you all. Bye.
Yeah, I'm not going. I've got back now. I don't know if I've told what you're doing.
I done a bit where he like stops.
What you doing?
He stops as like an image.
I'll do it as well. I got the okay there.
Ah,
Ah.
ah.